Beasts of Men and Gods, The Gargoyles Gift, a novella, by Ryan M. Oliver, narrated by Ryan M. Oliver. Chapter 1, The Gargoyles Gift. The shimmering stars dotted the night sky. A family clustered around the campfire of their farm, awaiting a new arrival into the world. Nestor, a boy of 10 years, sat among his siblings. The youngest of 4, Nestor copied his older brothers, Conrad and Aram, and oldest sibling, his sister, Tana, by staring intently into the crackling logs. The children watched the small log shot embers of orange and red like glowing grasshoppers.
"When will it happen?"
asked Nestor. "Shh," said Tana.
"But I want to know when we can see it,"
insisted Nestor. "Shh," said Aram.
"Why do we have to?"
"Stop talking," blurted Conrad. "You just don't listen, do you?" "Now, Conrad," said their mother, Leah, entering the light of the fire, "Nestor is only curious. Why, you were just as talkative at his age." Conrad slumped his head. "Sorry, Mother." Nestor rustled in his seat.
"So, Mother, what happens now? How long do we wait for it to hatch?"
His mother chuckled at his excitement. "Well, every gargoyle is different. Some take a couple hours, and others have taken many days."
"And then we get our gift?"
asked Nestor. "Gift?" asked Aram and Conrad. "Mother, what is Nest talking about?" asked Tana. Leah giggled at the question. No, Nestor. There is no physical gift. It doesn't work that way." She looked at the older 3. "I was explaining to him about the effect the gargoyles have on us if we grow close with them. I called it a gift." "Oh, like the story," said Aram. "You used to tell us that quite often, Mother. Why did you stop?" asked Conrad. "Honestly, I hadn't thought much about their gifts in a long time. No one here has experienced them, and you 3 already know the tale. Nestor is the only one who hasn't heard it yet." Nestor sat straight up.
"Can you tell us the story?"
"It has been a long time," said Leah. "I don't know if I remember it all." "I can help with the details," said Tana. "I still remember the whole thing." "Of course you do," said Conrad, rolling his eyes. "Oh, come on, you know it all too," Tana replied. "Don't act like it wasn't a favorite of yours when you were young."
"So, can we hear it then, Mother?"
Nestor asked again. Leah smiled. "I guess so, seeing as your father is still guarding the nests. I'll tell the story until it is my turn to stand watch." The 4 children leaned in toward the firelight, the heat of the small blaze warming their cheeks as their mother prepared to tell the tale of the Gargoyle's Gift. She stood up, stretched her legs, and stared at each of her kids, ensuring their attention. Her short stature cast a tall, inky shadow across the ground behind her, making her appear as a creature of the night. "It began many centuries ago, in the heart of Ruxar. A young boy wandered into the forest on a hot summer day. He enjoyed the shade of trees and the singing songbirds, but at the forest's end the boy came upon an odd sight. For what he saw was a great and powerful gargoyle. It stood upon a ridge overlooking the landscape. He approached the beast carefully, trying not to startle it. "Go away, boy," the gargoyle said, sensing the child. Undeterred, the boy asked, "What are you doing so close to the edge?" The gargoyle turned to face its small visitor. "I have decided to leave this land, to never return." "But why? What happened that made you want to leave?" the boy asked. The gargoyle stared into the boy's eyes, pondering whether to trust him with its motives. "This world does not understand me. This world and its people fear and hate me. I have nothing here, so I must leave, to find another home to call mine." Saddened by the beast's words, the boy said, "Not all people are bad. There are many who would love to know you, even to be your friend." "How do I know you're telling the truth?" "Let's make a deal. You come with me back to my family, and every morning I will ask you if you still want to leave. Then, if you do, I will not stop you again." The beast pondered the idea. It was apprehensive about accepting the child's gesture, but something about this boy assured the gargoyle's safety, so it reluctantly accepted. "I will come with you." Over the next several days, the boy showed kindness to the beast, giving it food and water. The two talked, listened, and laughed. They even learned about each other's ways of living. And every day, the boy would ask, "Are you ready to leave?" And the gargoyle would say, "Not today." Their friendship continued for many years, each learning and growing with the other by their side. It lasted all through the boy's adolescence, to adulthood, and even to fatherhood. The boy was now a man, but he still shared his life, kindness, and love with the gargoyle. And still at the end of every day, the question would be asked, "Are you ready to leave?" And the gargoyle would always reply, "Not today." Until one day, a day like any other, the man asked once again, "Are you ready to leave?" But this time, the gargoyle replied, "Yes, today is the day." The response astonished the man. "How could you want to leave after all this time? Have I not shown you kindness? Have I not shared my family with you? Have we not become great friends?" The gargoyle approached its longtime friend with a soft, toothy grin and a nudge. "It's not because you haven't shown me kindness, friendship, and love that I must leave. It is because you have opened yourself up to me and restored my faith in humanity that I must leave you. I must take what I have learned from you and make a life of my own, with my own kind. That way I can teach them what you have taught me. You saved me that day on the ridge. I want to spread the same energy with others that you shared with me on that day." The man began to tear up, eyes filled with sadness. He said, "I don't want to lose you." The gargoyle smiled widely. "Then I will give you something to always remember me by, to protect you and your family from dangers seen and unseen. This way we will always be connected." "I don't understand. How?" "Come closer. Let me give you something," said the gargoyle. The beast extended its wing and placed it softly on the man's head. The beast's warmth was a comfort. Then, as if a star had appeared out of nothing, a blinding light illuminated the two friends. The wondrous luminescence shined on for many minutes, until it finally dimmed to barely a twinkle. Once the light had vanished, the gargoyle spoke once again. "I have left you a gift, my dear friend. A part of me now lives inside you. You will forever be protected by my power, safe from all things evil, and your children will too gain its benevolence." Befuddled, the man thanked the gargoyle for its gift and long friendship. Then with a leap and a bound, the beast was gone, flying off into the world. Dozens of years passed. The now elderly man wandered the forest again, the same forest that led to the ridge. This time, however, he discovered something beyond imagining. A great group. Hundreds of beasts, small, large, winged, four-legged, and more, had just arrived in the land of Ruxar. "Oh, my," said the old one. A familiar beast stepped forward. The gargoyle. It, too, had aged. "Hello, old friend." The two friends embraced tightly, and then they watched as the many new inhabitants found their way onto the land into our everyday lives. These beasts, as you may know, are the beasts that live among us, the beasts we idolize in our way within our own separate countries. Friendship brought them here to Ruxar, and friendship shall make us all stronger for it.
Wow!
Said Nestor.
So I just need to find a gargoyle to touch me with its wing, and I will be able to... What will I be able to do, Mother?
Leah smiled. "Oh, Nestor, my boy, it's not that simple. Once we establish close bonds with a gargoyle, their presence may allow some people to see into the future."
Then I can see when Conrad and Aram are about to prank me? Like they did with the chicken eggs?
Nestor asked, jumping up from his seat. Everyone laughed. "Not exactly," said Leah. "Ness, those people can see the next day's events, or even many years later. Isn't that right, Mother?" asked Tana. "That's right," said Leah. "At least that is what I have been told. Those individuals are rare. A gargoyle who is also a seer must imprint on you for that to happen. However, the other two types imprint on humans more often." "Yeah, the nice ones give you beautiful dreams," said Aram. But you have to watch out for the gargoyles that prefer the dark, said Conrad. If they imprint on you, they give you nightmares that could scare a man to death. So small boys have little chance. Nestor's eyes grew wide. He glanced around into the darkness, looking for skulking gargoyles.
They won't get me, will they? You won't let that happen, will you, Mother?
Of course not, my dear boy. Your brother is just trying to scare you. But is it true about them, the gargoyles, that can give you nightmares? Asked Conrad. Yes, it is true, said Leah, but it takes a long time, and you must spend many years with one for the beast to share its curse with you. Nestor breathed a quick sigh of relief.
Oh, good. I really like the story, Mother. Do you know any more?
For another time, perhaps, said Leah. I believe I hear your father coming to switch with me again. The hour is late, and you four have chores and studying to do in the morning. So with that said, I must send you all to bed. The four children groaned loudly. We want to see the baby. Don't worry, kids, said their father, Jer, appearing in the dull orange glow. It'll be another half a day before the baby is born. Plenty of time for you four to get some sleep. The children finally gave way to their parents' order. They kissed their mother and father goodnight and left the soft campfire light for the pitch-black night. The three oldest strode as quickly as rabbits to the small house. Nestor, on the other hand, walked steadily, listening to the many sounds of the farm in the darkness. When he listened closely enough, he felt like he could hear the gargoyles that shared their lands, talking among themselves, gossiping about the new arrival, working hard to break through its shell and join their little family. Chapter 2. Thea. The sun rose over the horizon, waking the animals throughout the land. However, the small farm in the town of Darnus, nestled in the bosom of the Gargoylean countryside, had been awake long before sunrise. Young Nestor hurriedly performed his chores in hopes of seeing the baby gargoyle succeed in its struggle for freedom. His father would not make the eager boy wait long, for witnessing your first egg hatch, especially one as amazing as a gargoyle, was a dear sight, especially for a young boy.
Can we go now?
Asked Nestor. Finish bringing in the last of the chicken eggs and we can head out to the nest, replied Jer.
All right.
On the way, we need to check the crops in the outlying fields.
Oh, far.
Trust me, it will only take a moment.
Okay, then straight to the egg.
Jer chuckled. Yes, then we will go see the egg. Your mother will still be there watching over it. Thrilled, Nestor gathered the many eggs laid that day into his basket and ran them into the house, doing his best not to trip in his haste.
Do you think we will beat Tana, Conrad, and Amar?
Depends on how fast they finish their chores.
I'll bet we be the first ones.
All right, let's move out to the field. Come on, son.
I'll race you, Father,
shouted Nestor, sprinting off into the field. Nestor did not wait, nor could he have if he had tried. The idea of watching a beast so great being born tightly gripped the boy's curiosity. His mother had finally allowed him to join the family activity of healing the wild gargoyles in the area. She was quite a woman, venturing out into the forest sometimes in the middle of the night to help crying gargoyles. Most folk would believe her mad, but not Nestor. He was fascinated by her knowledge of the creatures. Nestor, slow down, boy, said his father, still jogging into the fields.
Hurry, Father.
You know what? You go ahead. I'll be there soon enough. Go help your mother.
Thank you, Father,
said Nestor, picking up speed again, racing in the direction of last night's campfire. Upon arrival at the ashen circle, Nestor stopped and listened. He could hear the breeze gently rustle leaves in the distance, and the sounds of farm animals pinged together as an erratic chorus. Then he heard his mother. She was talking to the egg. He took off again in her direction, taking only seconds to arrive on the scene. "Oh, good, you're here at last," said Leah, her gaze fixed on the lemon-sized egg under a tree. "I was worried your father was keeping you too long."
I wouldn't miss this, Mother. I had a breakaway from my chores,
Nestor replied. Leah ruffled his bushy brown hair and smiled. Like mother, like son. Nestor smiled back, then returned his sights to the miracle unfolding in front of him.
So how much longer?
Another hour at least, my sweet. Just be patient. Important events like this truly must be savored.
Okay. It's just that I've never seen one before. A baby gargoyle, I mean?
Well, let's sit then and wait for your father, brothers, and sister to arrive. That shouldn't be far behind. Nestor sat watching the little gray egg wiggle gently. Occasionally he saw a small piece of eggshell rise and fall.
So why did the mother leave this little one?
I don't really know, but I have thought that maybe the mother can sense something wrong with her baby. She doesn't believe it will survive, so to save herself, she leaves it here, a sort of extra sense, because otherwise this little one would be guarded fiercely by its mother. Nestor thought for a moment.
That's really sad, Mother. Would you ever leave us if anything was wrong with us?
The two locked eyes. She smiled sweetly and leaned into her little boy, wrapping her around him. Never, not ever. In fact, I would fight harder for you. Nestor smiled widely.
Okay, good. I thought so.
Now, if you make me mad, that's a whole other story. I may just have to bury you in the garden and see what sprouts up to replace you, Leah said, giggling. A stampede of footsteps bounded toward the mother and son in the form of Nestor's father and siblings. The four joined them and gathered around the slowly hatching egg. Discussions filled the open void of the forest as the family waited. Tana chatted wildly about the birds nesting in the trees. Conrad talked fervently of the need to slaughter an aggressive heifer that had given him grief that morning, and Amar maintained a steady laugh at his older brother's expense from the scene in the pig pen. Nestor's father and mother talked over their children, chatting about various items, but none so interesting to young Nestor as this egg. This small, remarkable thing that broke the monotony and hard labor of farm living. This infinitesimal natural phenomenon, which could be happening unnoticed by everyone, was being watched so intently by many. Nestor felt a deep connection to the little creature, and it had not even seen daylight. Then, a crack.
Look,
said Nestor. The chatter ceased. Shh! Don't want to scare it, whispered Leah. The family looked on and waited. The tiny creature created small breaks and creaked about inside its tiny home. Infant squeaking and squeals emanated from the egg. A life was erupting, a small, beautiful life. Another pop, crackle, and crisp snap came from the struggling baby gargoyle. Then, with a wiggle and stretch, wings unfurled, arms next, and then a pointy snout and sharp eyes. The infant at last escaped its warm confines and looked about the new world.
Wow,
said Nestor.
He's incredible.
It's a girl, said Tana. It is? How can you tell? Asked their father. Its snout. It is more pointed than the male's. That's right, isn't it, Mother? Asked Tana. Yes, and if you look at its wings, it already has a pointed wingtip. That is for defense. As it grows, the males get larger and the girls use their wingtips to fend off the aggressive boys. Oh, you mean like Conrad, said Amar. Conrad shook his head and elbowed his younger brother. You're an idiot.
So what do we call her?
Asked Nestor.
We are keeping her, aren't we?
That depends on her, Leah replied. Once she's a little older, she may want to live out here in the wild. They can be dangerous, Nestor, said Jair. I don't really like the idea of gargoyles being so close on the farm anyway.
But we have gargoyles on the farm already,
said Nestor. Those are at the perimeter, said Conrad, and they don't come around unless something happens. They've learned that Mother will help when they need it. But those gargoyles are still wild, little brother. Yes, and I give them herbs to calm them so I can help heal their ailments, said Leah.
But we've never had a baby before,
said Nestor, pleading. Nestor's parents exchanged looks and held a conversation without speaking a single word. The two looked back at their youngest son and nodded their heads. Nestor leaped with joy. Then he kneeled and said,
I will call you Fia.
The family smiled at the little gargoyle and the little boy who had made a new friend. Leah ushered Jair and the others back home to prepare for a meal. Then she and Nestor stayed behind to feed Fia and make her at home in her nest outside among the trees where she would be safe from predators and other gargoyles.
Why are we not bringing Fia home to live with us?
Nestor asked his mother after the rest of their family had left. Because she is still wild. While yes, she is a baby, these creatures are hardy beasts. They live all seasons outdoors. Gargoyles are exceptional survivors. Fia will make her way in the forest, and you, my son, will check on her daily.
Will I bring her food?
Only if it seems as if she has not eaten.
How will I know if she hasn't eaten?
Well, I imagine she will do her best to eat parts of you, like your little fingers, said Leah, laughing.
I don't want that to happen. I will make sure I bring something for her every day, just in case.
The two ambled back home, leaving their new winged neighbor to settle in for the remainder of the day and into the long night. Nestor, on the other hand, would return to his chores and help prepare dinner in the evening. All the while, he would bombard his parents and siblings with questions about Fia and her kind. Chapter 3. A Race to Nowhere. 5 years passed. Every morning, Nestor woke, took his walk to check on Fia, and studied her. Some days, he did not see her because she was hunting in the forest. On those days, Nestor would leave small animals caught in his traps along the forest for her. On the days he saw her, she might be curled up in the shade, sleeping or walking about searching for scraps. Nestor loved watching her on those mornings. Her gray skin was sleek as velvet. She would fold and extend her wings to stretch them after a long flight above the forest and plains. Fia's silver eyes would lock onto him, but the boy never showed fear, only interest. At times, Nestor would walk close to the beast, wanting to pet her. His brothers and he had placed a bet on whether Gargoyle's skin was rough, unlike its appearance. But Nestor's reasons to get close weren't so superficial. He desired to know everything about Fia. Unfortunately, every time he attempted, she would whip her dagger-like tail and open her wings, making her appear twice as large and hundreds of times more dangerous. The first time she did this, Nestor did not return for almost a week. But his curiosity about how gargoyles existed continued to fascinate him until he felt compelled to return. Once the morning trip to Fia's grove was complete, Nestor would continue his daily chores of feeding the chickens, cleaning the coop, collecting the eggs, helping his brothers with the pigs, mending fences, aiding his father with the crop, and finally assisting his mother in preparing medicinal herbs for both people and gargoyles. This was Nestor's favorite time of day, second only to visiting Fia. His mother and he would discuss gargoyle behavior. While Nestor's father was still nervous about his young son's visit to see Fia, his mother thought it was brilliant. She knew the risks, but seeing her son following her interests made Leah proud. At the end of one day, Nestor arrived to lend his mother his hands. Leah was working in the herb garden behind the house. She was kneeling on the ground, feeling and smelling the herbs to assess their readiness for use. As Nestor rounded the back, he heard a snarl at the forest's edge. "Did you hear that?" asked Nestor. "Yes." "Was that a wolf?" "No, gargoyle," replied his mother. "How do you know?" "Mature hearing and experience." "But I see Fia daily, and I still don't know all her sounds." "Oh, son, I have heard hundreds of gargoyles snarl and growl at me before I helped them. I would know those in my sleep." Nestor approached his mother. "What do you think is happening?" "Probably a couple of males fighting over a female in the area." "Do you think they're after Fia?" "No, she is still too young to have babies. Another 5 years or so, and she will go searching for an adequate mate." "But I don't want her to leave," said Nestor. "Don't worry too much. She will live in this land her entire life, only traveling as she needs." "Well, that's a relief. You've really grown to care for Fia, haven't you?" "Oh, yes," said Nestor. "She is fascinating. She still makes me nervous, but only when I try to pet her." Leah shook her head. "I wouldn't push her. She won't let anyone get close to her unless she wants to. But I've been visiting her for years now, and I bring her food. Why is she so hesitant?" "It's in her nature. She has to protect herself. Gargoyles are not quick to trust." "I don't understand her. I have known her since she was a hatchling." "Yes, you have," said his mother. But we did not bring her into the house. If we had then, we would have her walking about like a dog." "What's so bad about that?" asked Nestor. Leah smiled wildly. "First off, your father would not allow it. Secondly, do you really think we would have any animals on the farm alive?" Nestor shrugged. "Yeah, you're probably right. Just give her time. She is the first in her bloodline to really know humans from birth. Trust takes time for these beasts." "So you're saying that the gift of the gargoyle could still affect one of us?" "Probably not us. Maybe your children, perhaps if you stay close to other gargoyles and regularly visit Fia. No one really knows how it works." "Okay," Nestor sighed. "I wonder which one she is." "Oh, I can tell you that." "What? You can?" "Oh, yes. I knew when she was born what she was." "And why did you never tell me?" "You were so young and so passionate. I knew you weren't mature enough." "I was too." "Maybe you still aren't ready." Nestor glared at his mother. "You know I won't do anything too stupid." She smiled. "I'm hoping." "Can you teach me?" "Teach you? How to tell the difference? Like, why are there 3 different types anyway?" Leah stood up, stretched her legs, and led Nestor back to the house. The two walked inside where Tana was preparing dinner. Amar was cleaning his boots, and their father was sitting in his rocking chair, enjoying the quiet. Leah set her basket of herbs on the table and took a seat. Nestor followed, taking a seat across from her. "So?" asked Nestor. "So?" replied Leah. "How do you tell the difference?" Nestor asked. "Ah," said Leah. "Well, I guess I can tell the story. It's more of a fable than a true story." "Is this the one about the race?" asked Amar, still cleaning the mud from his boots. "Yes, it is," said Leah. "That is Conrad's favorite," said Jer. "When he was young, he would search the skies for the gargoyle in the tale." "Shh! Don't ruin it for me," begged Nestor. "I've never heard this one." "Conrad will be upset when he finds out Mom was telling stories without him here," said Amar. "If he didn't want to miss Mom's stories, then he wouldn't have gone to join the military, would he have?" said Tana, now cutting the vegetables and stoking the fire. "Amar, help your sister with dinner," said Jer. "Nestor, you as well." "But, Father, I want to hear the story," said Nestor. "You can do both at once," Leah said. "Don't talk back. Do as your father says." Nestor and Amar begrudgingly stood up and began doing their part for dinner. Tana thanked her parents and began ordering her little brothers around like a leader in the army. "You can tell them the story, Mother. I have them working on simple tasks that even they can't mess up." Leah stared disapprovingly and began. One morning, 3 gargoyles, gray in color and young in age, gathered to have some fun. The friends decided to fly in a race to the edge of the country. They wished to know which of them was the fastest, the bravest, and the most cunning. When they reached the edge, the 3 would tell each other which path they had each taken, hoping to impress each other with their choice. With their destination in mind, the 3 took off, heading in different directions. The first gargoyle leaped high and flew higher. She stretched her wings out, beating them hard, climbing as high as they would allow, until she flew so high that she burst through the clouds and was atop the world itself. She could not believe the beauty. The puffy clouds floated next to her upon the wind. She could see for hundreds of miles in either direction. She would surely win this race, she thought. But she quickly realized that while she could fly as fast as the wind could carry her, no doubt flying faster than any other gargoyle below the clouds, she could not control her flight. She was now on a race to nowhere. She did everything to try to gain control, fly right, fly left, and even try to glide down below the blanket of clouds. None of it was of any use. The wind and updrafts proved too strong for her. Even pulling her wings in was a challenge. because they were too tired and she was too weak from her ascent. She was stuck among the clouds and sky. The gargoyle above the clouds hung there over Gargoyle for many years, catching birds for food, drinking water from the clouds, and resting her exhausted wings on the air, gaining her strength for her eventual descent to the ground. There was no telling how long she would be up in the sky. Over those years, her skin grew darker, her eyes adapted, adjusting to the harsh daylight, and her muscles shrank from lack of use. However, she did gain a sense of beauty no other creature could imagine. She obtained solitude and time to reflect on the wonders of life and their potential. She focused on the positive aspects of the situation she had gotten herself into, embracing the vibrantly painted sky at every dusk and dawn. Then one day, the clouds cleared, the wind died, and her wings required her to flap to stay still. She realized this was her chance to escape the skies. She took a deep breath and folded her wings for a controlled glide down to the ground. Upon landing, her feet felt strange against the dirt. The weight of her body tensed her muscles. She was glad to be on the ground again, but she would miss the glorious views from being so high. Today, the gargoyles descended from her are known to be blessed with glorious dreams. Dreams so beautiful and joyous that those who share them are also endowed with feelings of comfort and serenity. They even possess the facilities of immense creativity. For we are at our best when we feel most comfortable with ourselves. Some would say these beasts are truly at peace with themselves, and those humans who possess this gift feel the same. To this day, these smaller gargoyles can be seen flying above the clouds to hunt, and they are known to soar in the skies for days. Now the second gargoyle chose a different route. He decided to enter the great tunnels and caves that line the Gargoylian plains. He thought he could navigate them well enough to reach the other side of the country long before his friends. To his surprise, his ability to see in the dark was not as acute or sophisticated as he had assumed, so he quickly found himself lost in a race to nowhere. Over the next few years, he survived on small puddles of water and the rats and bats of the caves. He grew frustrated and resented choosing his path of overwhelming darkness. The rock walls were cold and sharp, causing him to cut himself, which added to his self-hatred. With time, however, his eyes adjusted to the dark. His senses became enhanced, allowing him to smell the rodents and other small animals that got lost in the rocky labyrinth, and even hear their tiniest whispers. These sensory gifts came at a price. While he had enhanced his hunting skills, his mind began to deteriorate. Sleep became rare. Nightmares of what lurked in the blackness flooded his mind every hour he slept. Large cave spiders and the very animals he would eat would nibble at his feet and body, waking him, causing him to thrash angrily. Over the next few years, as his senses heightened, he began to smell sunlight. One day, when he woke from a rare, undisturbed sleep, his nose caught a whiff of something that had been absent from his life for years. He decided to follow it. He wandered the caves, turning left and right, following a beacon he could not see but felt the need to find. Then as he turned one last corner, his eyes filled with yellow light. His pupils ached from the sight, but he pressed on. He desired the openness of the world so much. With every step forward, he could feel the sun's warmth on his blanched skin, but as he approached the cave's mouth, he found himself incapable of leaving. For his time underground, absent the sun, had created a creature meant only for darkness. To this day, you will find his descendants hunting late into the night, catching small creatures that crawl along the ground. Their wings are smaller than those of the most gargoyles, and if they fly, it is only just above the trees. Humans who possess the gift of this beast will fall into despair from crippling nightmares. However, a few strong humans have accepted their fears and thereby become fearless in anything they pursue. Now the third and final gargoyle who took place in the race to nowhere was one who took the path of neither high nor low. Instead, she took the path of the forests, mountains, and plains, staying where she knew she could navigate best. However, because of her youth, she had a terrible time finding her way. She needed to learn the way of the land and its patterns. So over the years of being lost, she took account of the seasons, the hours of daylight, the migrations of birds, the movements of deer, the flow of rivers, and the habits of the weather. This time spent among the world and all its inhabitants and phenomena gained her a special kind of knowledge. A wisdom, some say. This gargoyle's ability to identify patterns and learn from them developed into a mature ability to predict the future. She would know where the animals would be for her to hunt that day. She would know to stay away from the rivers during storms and when hunters arrived. And when humans arrived, she observed them, learning of their actions and motives. To this day, the gargoyles descended from her are the most intriguing. It is said that when she mothered her first hatchling, she taught her the knowledge of patterns, allowing her children to grow its ability even more. Today, these gargoyles have evolved to the point where they can see into the future, learning about people who don't even exist today. That is one reason they are sought out, and being sought has made them cautious among other creatures. People have tried to use their abilities for terrible purposes. It is only with time and great persistence that this type of gargoyle can be persuaded to trust anything but its own kind. Leia finished her story as the three children began putting food on their plates. As the family gathered around the table, Nestor asked more questions than his mother had answers to. Even his older brother and sister questioned the story and their knowledge of gargoyles. As the evening went on within the small home, Nestor hoped he could obtain the knowledge of patterns and wisdom that the gargoyle in the story had gained. Before the family turned in for the night, their discussion of the story morphed into retelling fun memories of life on the farm. Most of those stories involved someone's embarrassment or, altogether, laughable misery. When Nestor settled down enough to lay in his bed, he imagined his future as a man of wisdom who would know everything before it happened. It seemed like an amazing gift to possess. The first hour of silence and darkness that night brought a slew of odd sounds, including snarls and growls. Nestor rose from his bed, alert and curious, and made his way outside the house. The moon's bright silver glow helped him navigate the uneven ground. As he walked farther from the house, the ominous sounds grew louder. Nestor turned a corner of the house and came upon two gargoyles in a standoff. Each was snarling at the other. Each one's great pointed teeth were on display for the other to see, their tails erect like scorpions aimed at their enemy, and their wings spread like great arms waiting to strike. Nestor watched intently from a distance as the two held each other's stare, just waiting for one to make the first move. A moment passed. The wind creaked the trees and rustled the leaves. In that span of time, each gargoyle lunged at the other. The grappling beast snapped and bit, swung and swooshed and stabbed, each tearing away at their foe. Nestor grew concerned for them. He did not wish to see them kill one another. "Hey, stop!" said Nestor, shouting at the pair of dueling creatures. "Come on! Cut it out!" He picked up small stones and threw them, hitting the fighting gargoyles. The pair, feeling the rocks strike them, stopped mid-brawl. Their attention turned to the young man. Nestor, sensing his mistake and their awareness of him, slowly began walking backward toward the house. The gargoyles crouched low, now joining forces for a quick nighttime kill that would satisfy them both. "Easy, easy," said Nestor, arms miming a push. One of the gargoyles sprang high, wings out, teeth bared, and landed feet away from Nestor. The other bounded forward, thrusting its pointed tail like a coiled snake at Nestor's body. These advances frightened Nestor, who scurried backward, narrowly escaping the lethal attacks. His voice cracked as he shrieked, running and ducking from the quick cat-like gargoyles. Then a shadow eclipsed the moonlight. Both gargoyles stopped to look. Fia had flown by overhead and was now falling fast, landing between Nestor and the two beasts. Fia crouched low, bladed wingtips up and out, and her tail poised to penetrate skin. Her snarl was deep and menacing. The two gargoyles growled back. Their low, rumbling voices thrummed in harmony. At last, one leaped for Fia. She sliced at it, hitting the beast with a sharp wing and pointed tail. The second flanked her, nipping at her leg. She was too quick for him. Fia jumped and came crashing down upon the gargoyle, sinking her claws into its flesh. Her slashing talons tore the back of its wings, leaving marks like a tiller in the soil. The two gargoyles whined, cried, and bled. They growled loudly at Fia, insulting her in their own way for taking their meal, and then limped back into the forest. Leah and Jer met Nestor. Tana and Amar both stood above their parents, bows in hand, drawn and ready to fire. The two wide-eyed siblings aimed their arrows at Fia, who was backing up slowly. "No, don't hurt her! She saved me!" said Nestor, now being lifted by his parents. "What were you thinking?" Jer yelled, his voice trembling with worry. "Are you hurt? Did you get attacked?" asked Leah, concerned. "No, I would have been torn to pieces if it weren't for Fia. She heard me cry out and rescued me. I can't believe it." Nestor's parents and siblings looked at him with awe, and with even more awe at Fia. She stood many yards away, observing the family. Her look seemed to be one of concern, not fear. Tana and Amar lowered their bows. Then, with a wink, Fia lifted off, traveling back to her section of forest. However, it seemed to Nestor, standing with his family, that her actions that night had caused her territory to grow much larger.
Chapter 4. Recruits. The memory of the nearly fatal encounter with the gargoyles clung close to the surface of Nestor's mind. 3 years later, instead of having grown fearful of the creatures, he would continue to keep his ears up for similar sounds of dueling gargoyles and actively avoided them. He was grateful that Fia had been there in time. Her protective actions had surprised Nestor and his family. And to return the favor, he would visit Fia twice a day, bringing food and company when she allowed it. Nestor even thought she seemed to enjoy their visits now, since she occasionally approached close enough for him to touch her. He would never tell his older brothers they were right about her skin being rougher than it looked. Nestor used his newfound caution and continued interest to help his mother with her healing practices. He became quite adept at identifying natural herbs and assisting her with several injured gargoyles that would land on the farm. However, Nestor's favorite pastime was still finding abandoned eggs and watching over them. The experience always proved to be magical, and he learned something new every time. Through the years, as the children grew, the farm continued to flourish, although Nestor and his family were not immune to change and hardship. Decisions would come that made production slow, and eventually Nestor had made a decision of his own. "You want to join the military?" asked Jer. "Why, son?" asked Leah. "Well, Conrad left for the military," Nestor replied. "So," said Jer, "you're not Conrad." Nestor took a deep breath. "That is true, but every time we receive a letter, he tells of all the new skills he has learned, of all the places he's been in the kingdom, of all the people he's met." "Our home isn't good enough for you now?" asked Jer. "That's not it," Nestor replied. "Won't you miss the family? What about Fia?" asked Amar. "I will miss the family," said Nestor. "Fia is not a pet. She is wild, and she has you four to look after her." "But what of the farm?" asked Tana. "The farm will be fine," replied Nestor. But father is getting older, said Tana. And now with you and Conrad gone, who will help out in the fields? I'm not that old, Tana, said Jair. Nestor shook his head and snickered. Without me here, you won't have to produce as much. So if there is a harsh winter and low yield one season, you will be fine. I can send coin if it gets that bad. Is it really what you want to do, son? Asked Leah. Yes, Nestor replied. I've been thinking about it for a long time. I believe I could do well. I want to see what's out there. Maybe I could share what you all have taught me. The entire family was silent for a moment. Jair stood up from his chair and began circling the room, grabbing his chin in thought. Nestor, I don't like this, but I believe you are doing this for the right reasons. You should go. Nothing says you can't come back for a visit, said Leah. Nestor smiled at his parents' words. Thank you, Mother. Thank you, Father. Amar stood up, approaching Nestor, and hugged him in a snatch. Don't get hurt, little brother. Yes, and if you see Conrad, tell him he needs to come home more often, said Tana. Amar chuckled. Yeah, tell him his favorite pig misses him. Nestor smiled at his family's reaction. He was sure this would be the right decision. He was sure this was the path he was meant for. He only hoped he would have the foresight to do good by his nation and his kin. A half-year later, Nestor arrived in Cunagnus, the capital of the Gargoylian kingdom. His arrival and indoctrination into the armed forces would be nothing short of transformational. The many months of physical training inside the capital's walls would prove to be light work for the farm boy. However, some skills and people can prove difficult to handle. "Recruits," said Captain Thorne. All gave attention. "You will be taking part in learning the many skills of combat. You will learn how we sail, how to scout, how to track, and how to handle dangerous beasts in our lands and those of our neighbors." "Yes, Captain," all shouted in unison. "You will be paired up with another recruit. Teach them if they struggle. Learn from them if they excel. But their failures will be your failures. You either succeed as a team, or you lose as one." "Yes, Captain." "Await your pairing. They have been done at random." "Yes, Captain." The recruits stood still and silent as one by one names were called in twos. At last, Nestor was summoned. "Recruit Nestor. Recruit Torin." Both ran to meet the captain. "Yes, Captain," was said in unison once more. "Get to know one another. In an hour, the two of you will be closer than a Cerberus and its fleas." The captain stepped away, and Nestor reached out a hand. "I'm Nestor from Darnus." "Torin from Bruin." "Bruin, eh? That's not too far from my village. Close to the coast, right?" "Yes." "You sail much out there?" "Yeah." "You don't talk much, do you?" Torin smirked. "I don't want to get to know you if you're just going to bring me down." "What do you mean?" "You heard the captain. Your failures are mine. Then I guess I'll just have to fail the most amazing way possible so we're not forgotten," said Nestor, smirking back. Torin shook his head, trying to hide his amusement. "So, what can you do? I hear Darnus is full of shepherds and basket makers. We don't need any of those out here. Actually, my family has a full farm, and more often than not, we deal with dozens of gargoyles." "Gargoyles? You have some out there?" "Many, yes. Mostly wild ones." "Wait, mostly?" "Well, we kind of have one for a pet." "Wow! You have a domesticated gargoyle?" "Oh, no, she is far from domesticated, but she did save my life once from a couple of hungry gargoyles. I think they were the nightmare type." "Okay," said Torin, throwing his arm around Nestor's shoulder. "I was worried about being paired with you, being from the inland and all, but now I know people from Darnus wrangle wild gargoyles." Nestor decided not to correct him. As far as everyone else knew, he was the only gargoyle wrangler in the army. "You got that right. Now what's our first task?" Over the next many months of training alongside each other, Nestor and Torin became a formidable team. Each young man complemented the other's abilities. Torin, being from the coast, excelled in sailing and scouting. He could run many hours without stopping. Nestor, on the other hand, would teach his partner tracking skills and how to identify food and herbs all along the forests and plains. The skill that caused the largest rift between them was combat. Nestor struck fast with his wooden sword. "Block, Torin! Use the shield!" Torin retreated and regained his footing. "No, not again! You've clocked me with that thing more than once today!" Nestor darted forward and swiped at his legs. "Lift your leg! That is when you should be backing up." Torin let out a holler and charged forward, running head first into Nestor's body, taking them both down to the ground. "Something like that? No, nothing like that." "Recruits! Nestor and Torin," said Captain Thorn, "break it up and take your position at the archery range. Don't lose your focus there, or one of you could lose an eye." "Yes, Captain." The two marched to the archery range, picked up bows, and began aiming at targets. It was apparent that the pairing's abilities varied drastically here as well. "You need to lift your elbow, Nestor." "I know what I'm doing." "Then why haven't you hit the target yet?" "I hit the target." "No, your target. You have to hit your target, not the one 4 slots to the right of you." "What makes you so good at this?" "Natural talent, of course." Nestor scoffed. "Sure it does." "Well, all right. It's natural talent and years of practice fishing and hunting with bows and arrows. So that helps?" "Helps with what?" "Helps with telling me how long it will take you to learn how to use a sword and shield properly." "Oh, really?" Torin laughed. "Recruits, fall in," said Captain Thorn a little while later. "Yes, Captain." Thorn waited for everyone to face him. "We have a special guest today, another recruit of mine from 5 years ago. He is here to demonstrate how to scare off a beast and soldiers in dangerous situations." The captain signaled to a man who walked toward the group at attention. It was Conrad. "Good day, recruits," said Conrad. "Sir," shouted the group in unison. Nestor's eyes widened and his heart began to race. "Soon," Conrad began, "you will all be faced with something that will overwhelm you. Something that could potentially take your life. A rogue beast." Conrad turned and was handed a bottle he took in one hand and a candle in the other. Then he turned to face the group again. "This is dragon's breath." Conrad lit a cloth on top of the bottle and threw it into a small fire pit filled with kindling and logs from the previous night's fire. The concoction ignited the wood instantly. A wall of flames 10 feet tall spit sparks as it continued to ascend to the path of crossing birds. Every recruit crouched, guarding their faces from the rapid release of heat. Then all stood back to attention, carefully watching the fire dwindle down to a controlled burn within the fire pit's rocky confines. "This will be your greatest weapon against the dangers that exist out in the wild," said Conrad, walking closer to the fire pit. "Inside each bottle is a flammable fluid that, when it comes into contact with open flames, will erupt into a terrifying weapon that will swallow anything in its reach. I show you this not to scare you, but to impress upon you the mighty strength of and danger of fire." Conrad turned and walked back to Thorn. "Captain, they're all yours, sir." Thorn thanked Conrad and ordered the recruits to report to the training field for more instruction. Before leaving, Conrad eyed Nestor, smiled, and nodded. Nestor returned the smile. With a simple glance, he knew he had made his brother proud. The future would assuredly be an adventure.
Chapter 5. Rogues and Mobs. Nestor crouched down in the brush. The sky at dusk dimmed with every passing breath. Nestor's movements were slow and deliberate. He couldn't let it get away. Not again. This time, he would drive it away from the settlement and the people it had, and could still hurt. Nestor's chest thumped with every crackle of twigs and crunch of leaves. He knew the rogue gargoyle would be as driven to hunt him as he was to hunt it. A thud and a growl were all there was to warn Nestor. The pouncing beast swiped for Nestor's head. Nestor dropped into the brush, rolling among the foliage to confuse the gargoyle. In its delirious state, the creature clawed wildly at tree trunks, which dropped wispy flowers that danced in the evening breeze. Nestor steadied his breath and felt for his dagger. He unsheathed the small blade, keeping his eye on the slinking beast. Its wild eyes bounced from tree to tree and bush to bush, waiting to strike. At last the gargoyle looked away. Nestor threw his dagger into the woods. The beast's ears perked up at the sound of the object singing through air, and it pranced off to investigate. Nestor took the moment to stand, sprinting for the middle of the woods. It did not take long for the gargoyle to hear his actions. He could feel the air of the creature's wings whoosh by him, the heat of the gargoyle's body closing in on his back. Nestor dropped again. "Now!" A whoosh and breaking glass zipped by the gargoyle's ears. The crash and crackle of the dragon's breath bottles ignited a small fire behind the beast, forcing it to take to flight, only to be ensnared by a net from above. The gargoyle screeched and whined as it landed hard against the forest floor. Nestor skittered away from the animal, drew his bow, loaded an arrow, and shot a shallow dart into the frantic creature, who continued to thrash and angrily growl, until finally succumbing to the calming herb. "Good job, fellas," said Nestor. "I'm glad you got him before he got me." Torin climbed down out of the tree. "Well, I'm glad you got out the way this time. I hated watching you get caught in my net. Last time it was truly a pathetic sight. Not to mention almost deadly," Nestor replied. "This one here nearly ripped me apart before being scared away by the fire." "Speaking of fire," said Kian, their fellow soldier, climbing out of another tree, "we need to make sure that fire over there is put out." "Good idea," said Nestor, grinning. He ran over to where the fire had been set. The three soldiers promptly stamped out any embers, tossing dirt to bury spots still aglow. After several minutes of cleaning up, the three made their way back to their catch. "What now?" asked Cian. "We wait," said Nestor. "For?" asked Cian. "Captain Thorn should be here soon with more soldiers to haul this one back to the carriage," said Torin. "How far out are they?" asked Cian. "Hard to tell," said Nestor. "Torin, could you use your great scouting abilities and look over that ridge? Send a signal or something." "Oh, sure. Give me the job of running and climbing up ridges," replied Torin. "You have always bragged about your prowess as a scout," said Nestor. Without further delay, Torin found the top of the ridge and signaled the captain and others. The troops, alongside Nestor, Torin, and Cian, dragged the unconscious gargoyle to a wheeled stretcher to be transported to Cunagnas for a thorough examination. "You three soldiers did well," said Captain Thorn. "Now I have another assignment for you when we get back to the capital." "Yes, sir. May I ask what that job is?" asked Nestor. "Security detail for King Zun's castle. It appears that civil unrest may be on the rise." "What unrest, sir?" asked Torin. "Honestly, I don't know. I haven't seen any myself. All I know is the general says King Zun is worried about how people are reacting to his use of gargoyles within the city walls." "We will do what we can, sir," said Nestor. "It's all I ask of my soldiers. When we get back, take a day to rest up and then report to me for your guard detail in the morning." "Yes, Captain," said the three soldiers. Once Nestor woke to face the day's assignment, his anxiety quickly grew heavy in his chest. The idea of facing an unpredictable opponent, even one as dangerous as gargoyles, comforted him. Foreseeing people's actions was not as easy. He reported to Thorn early and alert. "Good morning, Captain," said Nestor. "Nestor, good to see you. We're still waiting on your two fellow soldiers." "I'm sorry for them, sir. It seems our assignments over the last few weeks have taken their toll on them. That is no excuse, however." "Indeed," said Thorn, clearing his throat. "Anyhow, I will deal with them when they arrive. You, on the other hand, can suit up, arm yourself with a spear and sword, and then go stand guard outside the castle gates. You will relieve the night guard. They will give you more detail on our predicament when you arrive." "Yes, sir." Nestor excused himself, made his way to the barracks, and began dressing himself in chainmail. As he dressed, he prepared his mind for the many instances of dealing with unruly people. What will happen How will I react to them? How will they react to me? Nestor pondered these questions and more as he dressed. His worry broke as Torn and Cian barged into the barracks like two runaway cows. "We're here," said Torn. "I can see that. Did you really need to crash into the door?" asked Nestor. "Running late. I needed to catch up," said Torn, breathless. "Did you two check in with the captain?" asked Nestor. "Oh, damn," said Cian. "We knew he had guard duty and came straight here." Nestor chuckled at their anguish. "You better go find him immediately. He wasn't thrilled about you two not showing up on time." "Wait, why didn't you wake us?" asked Cian. "Yeah, what happened to 'your failure is my failure'?" asked Torn. "I tried," said Nestor, "but you two were sleeping like the dead. I was going to throw water on you, but I couldn't risk being flogged so early in the morning." Both shook their heads and scowled at him before rushing off to meet their fate with Captain Thorn. Upon arrival, Nestor observed the guards' stance and behavior. The 5 guards stood at attention, watching the meandering crowd. It seemed like a simple detail. Stand and look tough. Nestor really hoped he could appear tough to folks. He approached the sentries. "Morning. I'm Nestor. I'm your relief today." "Where are the others?" asked one of the guards. "They are being chewed up by the captain for being late. They won't be here until he digests them," Nestor replied. The guard grinned. "All right, then. Here's the status. Nothing to report for the past 12 hours. The king will be addressing the people in the square here this afternoon. A word of the wise, if there is a show of force by the mob, get the king into the castle. No delays. If anything should happen to him, we could have a real problem on our hands." "No pressure," said Nestor. "I expect you can impress the importance of this on your tardy brothers," said the guard. "Yes, I can. Thank you. We will relieve you in 12 hours. Nestor nodded and took his position. One by one, Torn, Cian, and 2 other assigned to guard duty arrived, received the brief, and took their positions. They then waited for an important announcement that would prove irritating. Nestor missed the wild gargoyles. Several dull hours passed. Nestor's anxiety about the announcement waned. Perhaps it's hearsay, he thought. Rumors of bored citizens? No one congregated to await the king. No passing word had been announced to be ready for any disturbances. Nothing had stirred. Thank the stars, he thought. He wasn't even sure what the people of Cunugnas would have to fret about. The sun had begun to lower in the sky, and the evening air chilled the city. By Nestor's count, he had only a few hours until the end of his shift. An orange glow appeared, slowly floating on the stone walls of buildings and alleyways. Nestor's concentration was broken. The glow grew brighter. The noise grew louder. Footsteps, marching, chanting. A mob. What was coming? How would he deal with such things? No one had prepared him for this. Nestor looked to Torn. Do you hear that? Yeah. What do you think that is? I think I know, but I hope I'm wrong, said Nestor. The next moment, Nestor, Torn, and the other guards sat stunned as dozens of men and women stepped around the corners of streets, carrying torches and brandishing daggers, axes and bows. Stunned, Nestor reacted. Cian, alert the captain. Nestor stepped forward to address the approaching mob. Halt! State your business. The group marched into the courtyard, only stopping 10 paces away from where the guards stood. The group's individual conversations and voices carried within the courtyard of stone. A woman stepped forward, holding her hand high. We require an audience with the king. The mob shouted. Angry tones and sour faces were evident in the crowd. For what purpose? Asked Nestor, his voice cracking. We demand to know what he is going to do about his pets, the woman replied. Nestor assumed she was their leader. The gargoyles King Zun keeps in his castle and courtyards have been running amok. Nestor blinked, feeling sweat drip down his brow. I am sure the king did not intend any misfortune. No? Then why do you suppose 3 of your majesty's finest beasts have been eating my sheep? Asked the leader. And one nearly killed my daughter, said another. She was lucky I had my bow. Two of them fought and wrecked the roof of my house, said another. The complaints fired like volleys of arrows. By the end of the conversation, Nestor wasn't happy with the king either. He had half a mind to lead the mob through the gate to confront King Zun himself. Fortunately for the king, Nestor had sworn an oath to protect him, his family, and the kingdom. But that kingdom included his people, too. Nestor grew more and more conflicted. A sudden shout from behind him startled Nestor. He jumped and retreated from the sound of the metal gate clanging open. Captain Thorne, Cien, half a dozen guards, and none other than the king himself, followed by a young man dressed in robes that mirrored the king's, entered the courtyard. The prince, perhaps? The king spearheaded the small swarm of soldiers walking past Nestor, placing himself in the angry mob's direct line of sight. "My people, my dear folk of Cunagnas," King Zun said, his voice booming with authority and a dab of compassion. "I am deeply troubled by your misfortune." The leader of the mob took a step closer to the king. "Are you?" she asked, tears welling in her eyes. "Our homes on the outskirts have been assaulted by your beasts for weeks, and nothing, not even a whisper of action, has been made to correct it or prevent it from happening again." Zun nodded. "I am truly sorry for what you have suffered. I must take ownership for my negligence. The gargoyles we raise have freedoms within the city that I now see must be managed." The prince stepped forward, equal to his father. "This is my fault." The mob stirred, heads turned left and right, commenting on this development. "We want him brought to justice." The king stepped in front of his son as a shield. Now. "He must be punished," shouted a person. "I want vengeance for my daughter. Our house is ruined because of him." "Prince Xenos is not in the wrong here. I am king. I am responsible," announced King Zun, attempting to calm the heated coals of the mob's anger. "You don't care about your own people," said another man in the crowd. The mob crept forward. Their torches seemed to breathe new life, with the folk beginning to jostle the lit ends as they approached the king and his son. Several members of the mob drew their daggers, another readied an axe. Nestor even noticed a few archers on the flanks with bows and arrows in hand. Captain Thorne sounded for the guard to move. "Wall!" With the order, the guards advanced to cover the king and his son from an impending attack. "No," said King Zun. "No, stop. I must make this right. I will not do this behind swords and shields." Zun looked to his son. "We must make this right. You all deserve the truth." He looked back to his people. "It is no secret. We are a kingdom devoted to keeping our beasts close, breeding them here in the walls of Cunagnas, doing what we can to learn from each other. I have felt strongly about this aspect of life. My father and his father before him did the same. We have, however, found ourselves with no eggs for the past several years. This is due to the thinning of the bloodlines in the castle. No more are the mothers able to produce healthy young. We have to introduce new blood, new gargoyles into the fold. Unfortunately, these wild gargoyles are difficult to control." Prince Xenos glanced at his father and stepped forward. "I was placed in charge of the new occupants, and in a short amount of time I found myself failing miserably. Many escaped our castle walls and returned to the forest. Others that remained had not been so kind. They instead took advantage of the convenience of food here, in your homes, and the livestock in your farms. Endangering my people is not something I intended, nor ever wanted. So for my part, I hope you can find it in your hearts to forgive my father and me." The mob seemed to exhale their anger. A calm resonated from the group that had once been ready to strike. Nestor was delighted to see those who had begun to arm themselves now sheathe their daggers and put down their bows. "We will make this up to everyone here," said King Zun. "I want our kingdom to thrive. I want our kingdom to be open to improving its faults. I'm glad you came, but I am saddened that it took a group of this size and frustration to gain my attention. For that, I promise to do better. We will find carpenters to repair your homes. We will replace the livestock lost. And we will have our best healers examine your daughter and anyone else injured in this horrible ordeal. What are the gargoyles still untamed? Asked a mob member. And the new bloodline still required? Asked another. Nestor, seeing an opportunity to help, jumped in. I can help. Eyes darted to Nestor. His face grew flush, and his whole body froze for a moment at the attention. But he continued, My king, my prince, I may be able to help in your endeavors with the wild gargoyles. The king stared at Nestor, confused, as if forgetting his guards could speak. And how will you do this? I trained one before, at my home in Darnus, said Nestor, now sweating profusely, his heart beating deep in his ears. It's true, announced Torin. He did it when he was only a boy. Prince Xanos and King Zun shared a glance, and a quick decision was made. A chance was about to be taken. The king spoke one last time. I will be inquiring about this young soldier's skill in beast wrangling, and we will be removing the wild gargoyles from the city, post-haste. Again, I wish to see you all well. My deepest regrets for your suffering. Once their king's last words had fallen upon their ears, the mob, which moments ago was ready to fight, retreated into the city streets. A silence washed over the courtyard again. Nestor's mind spun, searching for logic in his intentions when speaking up. The king, Captain Thorn, and Prince Xanos approached Nestor. Thorn said, All right, son, your story better be spectacular, or we just promised those people a great and damning lie. Chapter 6. Pale, Jagged Spear. Nestor crept through the copse. His delicate steps did little to lessen the sharp crack of twigs and dying leaves. Dusk's rays waned through the canopy. He knew light would be gone for another day, but he still had work to do. We must go back. It'll be dark soon, said Torin. Shh, said Nestor. When you chose me to aid you in this new assignment, I didn't think I would make myself lunch for the very creatures we're trying to manage. Actually, given the time of day, you'd be a hearty dinner. Torin sighed, frustrated. You know what I mean. What are you looking for anyway? Do you not listen? Mostly, said Torin, cursing quietly. We're here in these patches of trees to find the abandoned eggs to bring back to the capital. That sounds like an invitation to be Gargoyle Scat, said Torin. You are so whiny. Yes, I'm whiny, because we have been out here, over there, and around the grounds of the city without one shred of evidence of a nest. I'm in desperate need of a drink, food, and girl to relieve my... Shh! There it is! Nestor crouched lower, signaling Torin to do the same. He scanned the brush for threats and approached the lonely egg sitting among the bed of branches. Exactly how do you know this egg has been abandoned? Torin whispered. Nestor rolled his eyes and breathed slowly. You see how the nest has been ruffled? Yes. And how there is nothing here protecting it? It is in plain view on the ground. Yes, I see that, but what of its parents? You mean the one we haven't seen? If this little one was being properly protected, the mother would have stopped us a quarter-mile back. So what about nests that aren't abandoned? What are those? Well, I know gargoyles prefer high cliffs, perches, where they can keep an eye on the terrain. Sometimes they will be in tall trees if they are desperate. How do you know this? My mother. She came across quite a few unhappy mother gargoyles in her youth. Then I learned of the one in the tree a few years back. I had decided to climb the tallest tree on my family's farm. That day was particularly beautiful. The wind was null, the sky absent of clouds. I began my climb, and about the time I reached the middle of the tree, I noticed a nest. I scurried up to get a closer look. I thought it was an eagle's nest. I had no idea what I had found. Then, as quick as a hummingbird, the mother gargoyle soared past me. She screeched horribly and flew into the tree to nab me. Thankfully, I was a nimble climber and able to descend to the bottom without too much skin loss. So the beast didn't chase after you? Oh no, Fia scared her off. She was never too far from me. Fia? The gargoyle I helped raise. She saved me from being eaten alive by 2 angry male gargoyles. Oh, so your history is full of good decisions. I see, said Torin. I never said I was perfect. Now let's scoop this little one up and get back to Konagnos. We'll place it with the others. I'm sure Captain Thorn will want a report of our last few months. The 2 friends stood up, egg in hand, and slowly made their way back to the city. In the darkness of the night, Nestor would use his good judgment to get them back safe and sound for another day of training as new additions to the Gargoylean military. 7 young gargoyles stood staring at the delectable morsel in Nestor's hand. The freshly killed chicken still danced and writhed, spilling the last of its life on the dirt. Drool dripped from the beasts' eager mouths, yet steady they stood. The courtyard containing them sat within the castle walls. Men and women of high regard observed the young soldier with these normally free-spirited creatures. Nestor dangled the feathered snack in one hand while signaling stillness in the other. Dark, yellowed eyes awaited their commander's orders. Up! Said Nestor, gesturing upward. The 7 beasts took off in a tornado of wings and claws. They ascended above the square and circled like vultures. Swoop! The beasts followed his movements, dropping into a dive, passing only inches from Nestor. Snatch! He ordered, throwing the decapitated bird into the air. The 7, one by one, flew to the airborne fowl, which was caught by the first in line. Ground! Gliding to a halt, each beast landed around Nestor in a circle, surrounding him and awaiting their next instruction. Nestor smiled. He scanned the feet of each for the one who had caught the mangled bird. Once eyed, he allowed the beast to eat. With one bite, it ate its snack whole, bones and all. Then, before jealousy raged among his winged ranks, Nestor gathered 6 more deceased chickens and, one at a time, rewarded the beasts. Well done, said King Zun, approaching the circle. General Rastus and I are impressed with their training. Nestor nodded. Thank you, my king. There is still much to teach them. Yes, but now that you have done the hard work, we can begin teaching others how to train gargoyles again, said General Rastus. Again? You mean we knew before? Asked Nestor. Oh, yes, said Captain Thorn. My predecessor, he was a great gargoyle trainer. However, his work got the better of him. There was an accident between him and a feral beast. But why did we not protect the knowledge? Asked Nestor. Why not write it down and spread it through the country? Those were the ways. Only a handful knew the intimate ways of gargoyle handling. Too many with such knowledge could threaten our nation if one decided to abuse the beast's strength, said General Rastus. That's enough history for one day, said King Zun. General Rastus and I must discuss other matters. We'll be watching you, soldier. Prince Xanos will no doubt feel indebted to your service. He has been working tirelessly, repairing the damage caused by the wild beasts from our failed attempts at taming the gargoyle. I'm happy to serve my king and my kingdom, sire, said Nestor. Zun nodded graciously and was off, followed, in stride, by Rastus. Nestor returned to his animals and performed a hand gesture, signaling the winged warriors to their territory, the castle's tallest tower. The 7 flew up simultaneously, landing gently atop the pointed roof and other stony perches. Thorn approached Nestor. This last year has been trying, yet your skills held true. Nestor grinned. I was nervous, but this allowed me to do what I believed possible at home with the gargoyles on our land. You have done well, but know that those beasts of yours will need to begin performing missions for the betterment of the kingdom. They may get hurt, or worse. I understand. Being in service to the kingdom can be dangerous. You're dismissed. You've earned the night off. Thank. A deep rumble interrupted Nestor. The skies shuddered. Flashes of pastel purple light filled Nestor and Thorn's eyes. Serrated lilac blade edges of electricity erupted. Webs of vivid strings reached out like a cosmic spiderweb. A storm. This could be trouble. It hasn't rained in weeks. The dry roofs and tinder within the city could prove problematic, Thorn replied. The lightning plunged to the ground like a pale, jagged spear thrown from giants above the clouds. The stark white bolt flashed its powerful strike at the heart of Cunagnos. Without waiting for an alarm, Nestor and Thorn ran to the perimeter wall. Smoke could be seen rising from a structure in town. Go, sound the alarm, said Thorn. I'll respond and see what can be done. Yes, sir. Nestor ran to the barracks, yelling for everyone to meet Thorn at the center of town. Soldiers, young and old, followed his order, making their way out of the barracks toward trouble. The bell sounded in the watchtower as more soldiers spread the word of the fire. Nestor's job was not complete. He had an idea, risky, but promising. Nestor ran back to the courtyard, sounded an ear-shattering whistle, and continued sprinting to town. The smoke rose steadily. A charred stink of burning clothes and homes filled his nostrils, irritating him. With every step, Nestor could hear sounds of panic. His heart raced with worry. He knew how terrifying and destructive fire could be. The soldiers and townfolk would need all the help they could find. Suddenly, flying overhead, 7 shadows loomed, nearly concealed by smoke. Nestor's assistants had arrived. He just hoped they could make a difference. At last, Nestor rounded another corner, revealing an inferno. The smoke rose high, billowing in the sky, now a black umbilical cord to the clouds. Scared parents screamed for their children, drowned out by roaring flames. Men and women alike doused water on their homes, hopelessly pouring what they could to put out the blaze. Farther and farther the fire spread. Flames reached out like fingers grasping for more fuel to feed their voracious appetites. Small houses and buildings that made up Cunagnos' core were smoldering. The heat pulsated like a healthy beating heart, pumping fire in the absence of blood. Nestor assessed the chaos, whistled, and shouted, "Ground!" The 7 winged saviors swooped into his position. Dig! Nestor mimed digging. Each gargoyle began following its commander's instruction. Nestor turned about. He couldn't direct all 7 at once. Fighting a fire was not something he had yet taught them. "You!" he shouted to a passing soldier. "I need you." The young warrior complied. "What is it, sir?" He called Nestor sir, thinking Nestor was an officer. "Take this gargoyle," said Nestor, "and mime digging a trench around the fires. Follow her until the trench reaches all around the structures." The soldier looked petrified. "You want me to do what?" "Do as you're ordered, soldier, or we'll lose this city." "Yes, sir," said the man, now timidly miming at the toothy beast. Nestor grabbed a second beast, grabbed his face, and mimed at him to help his sister. The male gargoyle flew off as quickly as a bird in a windstorm. Nestor repeated the same tactic, running another soldier down the opposite side of the blaze. 2 more beasts dug the trench. Nestor quickly taught another tactic to the 3 gargoyles left. After several minutes of feeling quite foolish, Nestor ushered off the 3 beasts. He watched as each flying creature took rocks, barrels of dirt, and even water pails up over the fire and began dumping them into the blaze. After seeing his beasts off, Nestor joined the fire line, helping to rush buckets of water and dirt forward to smother the fire. He even helped move injured and confused people away from the fire's wrath. Hours went by of running, scooping, pouring, sweating, and dragging until the elegant form of a pleading young woman appeared. She stood shoulder height to Nestor and had long blonde hair and a slim build. Even filthy with dirt and soot, her elegance sang through like a rainbow in a rainstorm. "Please, someone help me. My friend, she's trapped." Nestor dropped his empty bucket. "Let's go." She led him down the street. The fire seemed to be dying. Low, belching breaths of furnace coals promising a harsh impact on the sizzling city. She led him to a house that glowed like the brightest candle. The fire had just ignited its roof. "How is she trapped?" asked Nestor. "Follow me," said the woman. The two entered the burning house. The heat from the blaze overhead swarmed around Nestor. On his face and chest, he could feel the sweltering temperature's intensity grow as they made their way to the back of the home. "She is underneath this," the woman said, pointing to a slab of fallen wood. The piece appeared to have collapsed from the home next to theirs. The fire's strength grew every moment that the two of them stood. Nestor could feel his body starting to fade. The hours of labor and heat were compounding, and Nestor did not know how much longer his energy could hold. With that thought, Nestor ignored every ounce of discomfort and pain. He began throwing items off the slab of wood, tossing boards aside as easily as kindling. Finally, the slab was all that lay in the way of a rescue. Nestor grabbed at the flat wood and lifted. His aching muscles trembled, spasming, fatigued. He tried again, grunting and swearing with every exhale. "I need your help," shouted Nestor. The woman jumped into place, and the two of them simultaneously lifted. Their combined strength upended the board from the woman's friend. The girl lay there, unconscious, bleeding. Nestor worried the worst. "Hold it," said Nestor. The woman steadied the board. Nestor dragged the injured girl away. Once the friend was clear, the woman let the board fall. It slammed hard against the ground, violently causing the house to vibrate and creak. The torrent of the blaze began to accelerate. Nestor, sensing their danger, lifted the girl onto his shoulder. The woman grasped his hand and led him closer to the exit. All of a sudden, a snapped beam crashed down behind them, unleashing a fountain of sparks and embers that closed in on the rescuers. With the last of his energy, Nestor dove from the door, landing himself and the injured girl just outside the collapsed home, where a rush of air belched ash and smoldering cinders onto the street. The woman went to her friend, pulling her unconscious body to the middle of the road. Nestor felt a twinge in his leg, stood carefully, and hobbled over to the pair. "Is she alive?" Nestor asked, panting and coughing up black granules. "I can't tell." Nestor dropped his ear to her chest. "There is a heartbeat." He placed his fingers to her nose. "And she's breathing." The woman fell over, in relief. "Thank the kings!" Nestor fell over next to the rescued girl. His body felt heavy. All of his strength was gone. He'd given everything. He felt as if he would sleep for months after tonight. Nestor turned back to find the woman had vanished into the streets. Moments later, she reappeared with a man and a woman Nestor could only assume were her friend's parents. The mother and father fell to their daughter's side to attend to her injuries. Nestor continued to drift off, scanning the skies for his gargoyles, who were hopefully still working tirelessly to control the fire. Next, Nestor felt a pair of hands on his shoulders and the sensation of someone helping him to stand. A cup of water was placed to his lips, and he drained it. He glanced up. The blonde woman had given it to him. "Thank you," said Nestor weakly. "I should be thanking you." Nestor mustered a dim grin. "What's her name?" "Gia." Nestor nodded. "And yours?" "Phaedra." "Phaedra? That's beautiful," said Nestor, beginning to slip into unconsciousness. Phaedra smiled softly. "Relax now. I'll take care of you." With those last comforting words, Nestor drifted into a deep sleep, a sleep that would let him escape the blaze, collapsing houses, and flying gargoyles. But one thing would never escape Nestor's mind, and her name was Phaedra. Chapter 7. Love Sickness. 3 days after the fire, Nestor was back on his feet. He found himself walking to the barracks to report to Captain Thorne. He had a little time, so he decided to take a trip around the damaged section of the city. As he approached the area, he could smell the still smoldering homes. The scent of charred wood hung heavy in the air. Nestor wondered how long it would take to repair the damage. Nestor, said Torin, running up behind him. Torin, hi. The two friends shook hands and began walking together. I'm surprised to see you up, said Torin. You did save a girl from a burning building. Nestor nodded. Yeah, the heat got to me, I guess. I hear the girl you rescued is going to recover, said Torin. That's great, said Nestor, glad but unenthused. Nestor, said Torin, stepping in front of him, bringing him to a stop. They say you're the one who sent the gargoyles out to help put out the fire. Yeah, that's right. And I'm also the one who lost one of the gargoyles in that fire. I'm heading to meet Thorn right now. I'm sure I'll be expelled from the army for it. What? No. Everyone, including the king and General Rastus, was impressed with your performance. Thorn was especially proud. Performance. You say it as if I acted in a play. No, you did more than that. I saw you that night, Nestor. That fire line was breaking apart. You rallied the troops and townsfolk together. You're the one who contained the fire. You're the one who used our beasts to help the capital. You're a hero. I did my duty. Nothing more, said Nestor stoically. Why are you not more excited about this? I'm not looking to gain any accolades. It's the military. No one is looking to give out any. They want to give out more responsibility. Nestor smiled. Well, that sounds about right. You all right? You seem distracted. Yeah, I'm just looking for someone. Oh, you mean that beauty who was cradling you in the street? You looked pretty comfortable when we found you. Wait, you saw her? Saw her? How could I have not? Even covered in soot and debris, she could inspire me to run into a burning building. Nestor smiled widely. Didn't even get to say goodbye. I came back here hoping to see her. Torin laughed. You have it bad, brother. What? Love sickness. It's impressive. I mean, leave it to you to fall for a girl who leads you into a burning house just for it to collapse on you. Talk about a damning first impression. Yeah, well, too bad she didn't feel the same way. Torin chuckled. Boy, you're thick. Then why did she check on you most of the night after we got you to the med bay? Wait, you could have led with that. No thanks, I like watching you squirm. It's a rare pleasure for me. So what do you know? I'll do you a favor. Follow me. I can take you to where she lives. From the moment Nestor and Phaedra met, literal and figurative sparks burned bright. A new stage of Nestor's life had begun the day of the fire. He no longer thought of himself and his destiny. He no longer thought of his own worth. Nestor included Phaedra in every aspect of his life. Throughout the coming months, the two would grow close. Spending time with one another became as important as eating, until the day Nestor decided he could not live without her. What are we doing here, Nestor? Asked Phaedra, smiling brightly. Nestor smirked. What, you don't like beautiful views outside of the capital? No, I just don't want to compete for your attention. Is that right? Yes, the landscape is so magnificent that I don't believe I can hold a candle to its allure. Trust me, my love, you are quite alluring. In fact, in your presence, the world seems more attractive. Phaedra pushed Nestor playfully. You are such a bore. It's amazing that anyone believes a word you say. Sometimes I can't believe my own nonsense. Phaedra grabbed Nestor, wrapped her arms around his midsection. So, what are we really doing here? Well, I thought it was about time. Time? Time for what? Phaedra asked. Supper. Dusk is approaching. Oh, right. Supper. Phaedra let go of her tight grip. She spun to take in the painted scenery. The far-off mountains jutted out of the plains and were being circled miles away by birds and wild gargoyles. Her focus helped ease her disappointment. After another second, she spun back to Nestor. He had taken a seat on the ground, arms stretched out to her. She took his hands in hers and descended to his level. "Faye, I love you," Nestor said. "These past few months since the night we met, I felt like all of my years before have led me to you. I feel as if my eyes have been opened wider to all the world's shades and intricacies. As if something pushed us together. I knew that night of the fire that my life would not be complete without you in it." Nestor, she stammered. "Phaedra," said Nestor, "will you do me the honor of sharing the rest of our lives together?" Phaedra's eyes sparkled. Her arms stretched out, and she leaped into Nestor's lap. The love-struck couple kissed. Their embrace was passionate and long, their love true and strong. The remaining light would bathe their bodies in the sunset's soft glow. Their intimacy and warmth would continue to outshine the most brilliant light, for nothing is stronger than true love. "Nestor, my boy," Captain Thorne said, waving him down. Nestor ran to meet him. "Good morning, sir." "Nestor, I want to tell you how happy I am for you. First, you're promoted to officer. Now you and Phaedra are to join hands. It's wonderful." "Thank you, Captain. I appreciate what you have done for me over the years, with the gargoyles and everything." "Well, you deserve it. And I understand that you have queued up a new batch of trainers." "Yes, sir. We now have 8 new soldiers capable of taking a hatchling and training it to aid in the kingdom's needs." "And what of your original 6 you trained? They must be ready to mate." "Prince Xanos has taken them to begin the breeding process." "Are you stepping aside from training them?" "Not fully. I am, however, enlisting the help of Cian. He has proven to be a very competent handler. The gargoyles sense I trust him, so they have begun to listen to his orders. We are learning new and amazing insights every day about our beastly partners." "I speak for the kingdom," said Thorne, "when I say we are better off that you are in it, Nestor. Now go grab your bride and ride away. Go get married, soldier." "Thank you, sir." Darnus welcomed back 2 soldiers that day. One, a captain, and the other, a newly commissioned officer, and his bride-to-be. Nestor and Phaedra arrived in the evening. A wonderful summer night ushered them to the farm. The shadows of the trees stood like black statues lining the perimeter of Nestor's family's land. Phaedra rode alongside her love in stunned awe. "You grew up here?" "Oh, yes," said Nestor. "You see that tree? I nearly got eaten there. And that grove? That is where I watched Fia hatch." "Will we meet her?" "I'm not sure. I've been absent for many years. She will most likely have moved on to associating with her own kind, almost exclusively." "That's too bad. I'd really like to thank the creature who saved my Nestor from becoming a nighttime snack." Nestor chuckled. "Perhaps you will." A long call was heard in the distance. "Nestor!" Another sounded. "Nestor, bring us your bride. We wish to tell her all about how terrible you are for her." Phaedra stared at Nestor, puzzled. What was that? Nestor's belly laugh nearly made his answer inaudible. "My brothers. Come, I'll introduce you. Conrad got leave from the army to come for the wedding." The 2 trotted down the fairway and fields, sliding to a stop next to the small house of Nestor's childhood. Nestor gracefully slid off his horse and slammed into the arms of his older brothers, Conrad and Aram. They held him tight, lifting him up and down like a toddler playing a game. Then they threw him to his sister Tana. She stepped away from her falling little brother. Nestor barely missed Tana in her round, pregnant belly. "Tana! I had no idea! Who do I have to kill, Conrad or Aram?" asked Nestor. Tana slapped him across the cheek. "You deserve that." Nestor laughed. Then he gently slipped past her belly to her arms, giving her a stern hug. "I missed you, sister. But in all seriousness, who is the unlucky rascal who calls you wife? Or are you incubating a little bastard in there? Now who's the scoundrel?" Tana slapped Nestor's head again and beckoned her husband, Alexei, to meet her inappropriate baby brother. The 2 shook hands, prompting Nestor to introduce his bride, still upon her horse. Everyone, this is Phaedra. Taking Nestor's hand, Phaedra unsaddled. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to meet you. Where are mother and father? Asked Nestor. We're right here, said Leah, coming out of the house and walking toward them. Her arms were spread wide open to accommodate both new arrivals. I cannot believe you are all here. It has been too long. And Phaedra, aren't you as beautiful as my Nessie described? Nessie? Asked Phaedra, smiling. I'm going to need to remember that one. Jair joined Leah. He introduced himself to Phaedra and welcomed home his youngest child with a stern handshake and a harder grin. I could be more excited, but I know your mother will smother you enough for the both of us. I'm excited to meet you all at last, said Phaedra. My parents will be arriving at tomorrow's end. Well, we will have time to get to know you a little more before then, said Leah. Jair, see to it everyone gets settled in the house. I must have a conversation with my boy alone. Nestor kissed his bride-to-be and watched as she was escorted into the full house. Leah approached Nestor with a smile of joy and sorrow, a face Nestor had often seen throughout his childhood. What is it, Mother? What's on your mind? There's something I must tell you. Yes, said Nestor, growing worried. It's about Fia. Yes, is she still here? Leah sighed with a pinch of melancholy. I'm afraid not. Oh, she finally moved north to the mountains then? No, son, she died, said Leah. It happened in the back, behind the house. Nestor felt a heaviness grow in his chest. How long ago? 3 months back. It was going to be in my next letter to you, but you know how slow communications are out here. Nestor nodded. How then? Mother, how did Fia die? Leah smiled nervously, tears in her eyes. Well, it seems your Fia was more attached to the family than originally thought. What do you mean? Because the 6 of us were there the day of her hatching, we must have all imprinted on her to a point. Yes, okay, that's not terribly uncommon. She had moved, you see, from the grove on the west perimeter, the north woods, the same area where those 2 male gargoyles that attacked me reigned. Yes. Well, she got into a nasty tussle one evening around dusk. Tana and Alexei rode in that day to tell us their good news. During the first hours of their arrival, we heard noises. 4 of us were out back enjoying the sun when the same pair of nightmare gargoyles slinked out of the thicket. Their wounds had healed, but scars left them gravely disfigured. I thought them long since dead. As did we. It appears that gargoyles hold grudges. Well, they attacked, and we would not be here if it weren't for Fia. She came to our family's rescue once again. The virulent beasts, said Nestor's. Are they dead? Yes. The fight was horrendous. I took Tana indoors. Alexei's quite a skilled fighter, a militiaman in his town. He and your father held one off while Fia worked her skills on the other. Your father had emptied his quiver. The beast was on its last spout of energy when Fia finally brought the creature down. My Fia. Our Fia. She made our family proud. She fell to the ground after she delivered the death stroke. Blood covered her. She panted and screeched in pain. I rejoined your father, and we did what we could, but her wounds were too extensive. She was incredibly strong. Nestor's shoulders slumped. He leaned into his mother. So, she's really gone then? I'm afraid so, son, Leah replied, sniffling. But not so much gone as moved on. Her lineage continues. What? Asked Nestor, a tear plummeting down his cheek. Fia was not only defending us, but she was a new mother. She'd made a nest in the ground at the closest point to our house. I thought wild gargoyles made their nests high up. They do, but Fia was not a wild gargoyle. She was hatched next to humans. We live on the ground. She believed her place was with us, close to the earth. Nestor shook his head in astonishment. Where is the egg? Is it safe? It is, and it will be your and Phaedra's wedding present. Hope she likes gargoyles. Nestor chuckled as rain-droplet tears hung and fell from his eyes. So do I. Phaedra and Nestor recited their vows under the canopy of trees at midday. Sunbeams radiating through the leaves surrounded the two, creating a stage made of nature and love. Family and friends from afar came to witness their union. With a few blissful moments to declare their undying fealty to each other, the two began their lives as husband and wife, to share with each other in both the blessings and challenges that life had to offer. The couple spent the evening dancing in the firelight and frenzy of blazing music and laughter. At last, once the celebration was complete, Nestor swept Phaedra off to their quarters where the bonds of intimacy and love would seal them together forever. 6 months after the wedding and its accompanying jovial times with family, the newlyweds had settled into their new home within the capital. Phaedra and Nestor's home sat blessedly nestled upon a hill on the outskirts of the city. The two prepared diligently for their new arrival, their unborn child growing strong within a glowing Phaedra's belly. It seems if our blessings are plentiful, said Nestor. I'm glad you are so excited to become a father, Phaedra replied. Most men, I hear, are not so enthused. Nestor walked to his wife, leaned in for a kiss, and said, I am not like most men. That I know, she said, raising her eyebrows. I, too, am pleased that you are so open to having a gargoyle on our property. I won't lie. I am concerned, especially with our newest addition in the coming year. But you train gargoyles with the army, so I'm comforted by that notion. Plus, the little winged guy will assuredly provide protection while you're away on business. He has already shown spunk for only hatching a few months. Nestor knelt, snagging the squirming infant gargoyle and talking to it. You and I will be spending more time at the square. That way I can train you with a new batch of babies. You'll grow fast and require strict structure if you're to be our home guardian. What name did you settle on? Phaedra asked. Behair, son of Phia, said Nestor, smiling at the thought of his childhood gargoyle. Well, we better be off to bed if you are to get little Behair training tomorrow. Good idea. He'll be at the training facility for several months. But we will visit the house, one day at a time. That way he will learn how to navigate the property and get the training and exercise he needs. Nestor looked down at the hatchling. I believe you will be a worthwhile burden, little Behair. Nestor's time was sucked up by long days and nights of training the little beasts. Phaedra grew bigger, but did not lose her optimism. While she missed her husband, she grew to cherish the quiet moments with her little unborn babe. One night, Nestor arrived home to find Phaedra sound asleep. Behair had grown, and as the small beast slinked beside him, Nestor realized he was the size of a large dog now. The gargoyle would find a small patch on the floor to sleep while Nestor readied himself for slumber. It did not take long for Nestor to close his eyes and drift off to the land of dreams and beyond. Nestor's mind would transform. Over many months, his mind would fall into a world of knowing, a world of the future, an unbiased reality known exclusively to him. At first, he would see blotches, fuzzy, misshapen forms, opaque shadows among the fog of the future. Then, images, clear profiles of events yet to be. Pictures and scenes of himself bubbled in his third eye. Depictions of Phaedra, his child, the army, and Ruxar took shape. A great ball of fear and panic woke him from rest. What? Asked Phaedra, doing her best to sit up with her pregnant belly. Nestor stopped thrashing about. I don't know. You had a nightmare. No, it felt real. What did? What did you see? Nestor sat up, rubbed his eyes, and grasped Phaedra's hands. It's nothing, darling. Go back to sleep. No. She caught him by surprise. Grogginess from sleep was still heavy on his head. You really want to know? He asked. Yes, now tell me, she demanded coolly. All right, well, still taken aback by her assertiveness, he divulged. I saw these images. At first, I thought they were memories, but you and I were much older. Your hair was silver. We had a son. He was tall and so handsome. I saw my siblings. They appeared terribly sad. I got the feeling that my parents had been... No, this is just a dream. No, Nestor, it was not a dream. What do you mean? Before you started seeing those images, what did you see? Nothing. It was just gray, a blank, foggy world on a cloudy day. There was more to it. You were screaming, Nestor. Phaedra paused for a moment, searching his eyes for secrets. This is nothing new, my sweet. You've experienced these dreams before. You cannot hide things from me. You knew? I figured these dreams would subside eventually. I didn't want to bother you. They will only not bother me if they don't bother you. Clearly, that is not the case. So tell me, what did you see? Well, let me think. Nestor seemed to search the room, as if hoping to find the answer on the wall, but he eventually found it in his mind's eye. Yes, I saw them. What did you see? There were 3 of them, 3 gargoyles, all different types. They were flying toward me. The darker and lighter one flew away, just as the 3rd flew right into me. When it hit me, I could see everything. It actually bit me. Damn near scalped me, it felt like. They are the messengers of the Gargoyles Gift, said Phaedra. You mean from the children's story? Yes, it is more common than you think. I'm honestly surprised your whole family doesn't possess gifts. Do you have a gift? Asked Nestor. No, my family hasn't spent time with gargoyles like you have, and it seems to me you have just been burdened with the rarest gift, foresight. What does this mean? It means you must be careful, my love. Phaedra laid a hand on his chest. I must tell someone. Captain Thorne, the king, someone. No, declared Phaedra. A look hard as stone appeared on her face. This is not something you share with anyone. I will be the only one who will know. But even so, you cannot share the visions you see with me. Why? How can they hurt? Because we may try to stop them. Or worse, others will want to stop you, possibly even use you for your gift. No one would be so brazen. My love, I warn you because... Phaedra stopped abruptly. I've heard the tales of caution from my family. What tales? What are you talking about? Why have I never... There was once a man, Phaedra began, during the time of the last king, Zun's father, Zelate. This man, like you, displayed the gift of foresight. He, however, was not quiet about it. Selflessly, he wished to share his gift with the world. Yet a terrible fate befell him, for King Zelate imprisoned him. He was never seen outside the castle walls again. Accounts from guards and staff inside the palace say he was tortured for his knowledge, that his tormentors were trying to control his abilities. Doctors, mages, and the king himself yearned to see if they could look into his mind as easily as one looks into a clear lake of fish. Nestor quieted himself, processing the information his beloved bestowed upon him. So a secret this shall be. I don't want to become a weapon. I don't want to lose you or our family. Then for the sake of our love and life together, said Phaedra, you need to keep quiet about these visions for all time. Nestor agreed quietly, nodding at his beloved. He did his best to sleep that night. However, the burden of foresight drilled into his mind, opening the scrolls of the future. As each subsequent scene unfolded, Nestor gained a new respect for the present and those who live in blissful ignorance of what comes next. On a morning filled to the brim with raindrops and storm clouds, Phaedra gave birth to a son, Orion. He was a beautiful child, sporting his mother's hair, his father's complexion, and a rambunctious nature to rival that of Nestor himself. Orion was destined to do well, for his father's vision had told it true. Yet, never did Nestor mention a word of that vision to the boy. It would be a special nugget of future sight held only by Nestor for many years to come. 5 years passed. The visions, which had begun in a slurry of images, slowed. At times, Nestor would sleep the sleep of the dead. Other visions filled his head with times of beautiful and terrible secrets, revealed to him like an enigmatic curtain being pulled back with every closing of his eyelids. Nestor obeyed Phaedra's wishes by keeping his visions to himself, even if darkness surrounded them, knowing he would see events that could not be undone. All he could do was prepare himself for the worst. In only one instance did Nestor act on preventing a vision, almost to his undoing. The fires started in the neighbor's barn that accelerated greedily, eating like a glutton at a feast. Using the night's cool breeze to push itself onto the roof, it consumed the barn, then quickly jumped to the house, killing everyone in it, both the parents and their young child. After repeated nighttime visions of smoke and screams, Nestor attempted a fruitless and damning rescue. In his attempt to prevent his neighbor's death, he inadvertently, in his sleepless days, unbalanced a lit lantern used to light the grounds on patrol at dusk. The heated glass was no protection against a sudden, sharp crack upon the earth. The infant flame broke free from its prison, and the loose straw of the stall fueled the evaporating embers, nurturing it to a quick and malevolent maturity. Gleaming orange tendrils curled as they climbed the walls, spreading licks of flame and sprinkling reckless sparks about. Nestor's unintended half-stumbles had released his lantern's hot inhabitants by way of broken shards. Nestor realized that dealing with the mysteries of his gift had tethered the fate of his neighbors toward inevitable doom. On that day, Nestor swore a binding oath never to try to prevent future events again. The cruel creator of the Gargoyles Gift appeared to mold plans for everyone, and the cost of deliberate intervention into this architecture's concoctions was most dear indeed. So, for the sake of his family, Nestor remained a spectator of his otherworldly gift. But for how long could he sit in silence? And worse, what would it cost him for not averting such terrible ends? Chapter 8. Renegades. A cool autumn morning invited the captains to the king's throne room. General Rastus had summoned them after receiving an important communication from the south. Nestor was in transit when his 7-year-old son, Orion, caught up to him on the road.
Father, father!
Nestor turned and kneeled to face his son. Yes, Orion, what is it?
Are you leaving again?
I don't know, son.
Why do you have to go?
Nestor grinned at Orion. I know you don't understand yet, but I have a duty to our nation, to our king, and most importantly, I have a duty to you and your mother. I work hard every day to keep you both safe. Orion unfurled his boyish grin.
What about Fahair?
Especially Fahair. He would be a lost little gargoyle without me protecting him.
Me, too. I protect him lots.
Orion boasted.
Yesterday I saved him from a mean squirrel trying to get his meat.
Nestor laughed and lifted his son. You're so brave. I bet he was grateful for you.
Mm-hmm. And I help all the time cleaning up after him.
You sure do, my boy. Nestor set Orion down. Now listen, I need to go talk to the king about boring soldier things. You think you can help your mother in the garden?
Sure can.
Orion threw his arms around Nestor, squeezed him tightly, and ran back to the house. Nestor scurried off to the gathering at the castle. Upon his arrival in the throne room, Torrin stood awaiting the news. Ah, you got an invitation too, I see, said Torrin. Invitation? It's not a party, Torrin. That is Lieutenant Torrin to you? I still can't believe they made you a lieutenant. I mean, I have trained gargoyles with higher prestige than you. Ha! And I'm telling Phaedra you called her a gargoyle. You grimy rat, started Nestor, cutting himself off to give his old friend a proper hello with a sturdy handshake and a narrow smile. How have you been? Has coastal duty been treating you well? As well as it can. I get to sail any time I please. We are monitoring the waters for any bandits floating about. Turns out not too many folks can swim, so that means I mainly settle disputes about fish and other fun-smelling conflicts. Sounds like you were made for that assignment. That's actually what Thorn said right before he retired. The two continued to reminisce about the old days, discussing women of Torrin's poor choosing, Nestor's family, and even occasional ranting about military politics. Finally, the last officers arrived, and a horn sounded, signifying the king's arrival. All faced the door, bowing their heads as the newly appointed King Xenos strode through the chamber doors, followed closely by General Rastus. Gather round, officers, gentlemen, and ladies of the court. We have pressing matters to discuss, announced King Xenos. Everyone mustered toward his majesty, standing in formation in front of him. Rastus stood to the right of the crowd, awaiting his turn to speak. General Rastus, said King Xenos, please deliver the news to our court and officers. Yes, sir, said Rastus, stepping forward. We have received disturbing reports from the Cerebrians. Our neighbors to the south are calling for aid. It appears that a large pack of dangerous Cerberus, no more than 9, led by a small group of crazed folk of the same country, have begun killing livestock, setting homes on fire, and in several instances have attacked and killed civilians. The violence has been steadily increasing for the past year. The Cerebrians have been dealt a difficult task in eliminating the threats. The group appears to be organized and swift. The Cerebrian military has now begun suffering casualties at the hands of these renegades. What business is it of ours to help them? Asked one officer. The general ignored the interruption and continued. King Rios of the Cerebrians has alerted both the Hydraean and Gargoylean kingdoms. The rebel pack has been slowly migrating north into less populated areas. There is now concern they could potentially migrate to both northern territories. The Hydraean king has already confirmed he will give his assistance. We will do the same. This decision is to preserve the well-being of our nation and that of our neighbors. Now, the court is open for questions, announced the king. Who will be leading this expedition? Asked a woman officer. I will be taking the lead, answered Rastus. To begin, I will take a small force with me, composed of some soldiers, our best gargoyles, and their trainers. We will meet the Cerebrians at their northern border and assess the situation. From there, we will determine if more support is required. Who will travel with you for the first wave? Asked Torrin. That is still being determined. However, I will request Captain Nestor to join me, along with anyone he recommends from his squad of handlers. Nestor grinned. Proud to serve, sir. If that is all the questions, we will be collecting the names of everyone traveling to Cerebria. We leave in 7 days. Dismissed, said King Xenos. Good luck to you all. A campfire blazed in the center of encircled soldiers. Nearly 2 weeks had passed. Those at the gathering held a common interest. In the waning light of day, 3 kingdoms of men and beasts discussed a conflict unique to their lands, one they hoped to solve together as allies. Nestor stood silent, listening to Rastus and his fellow generals. "Welcome, Gargoylians. Welcome, generals," said Padraig, general of the Cerebrians. "I was elated to hear of your king's acceptance of our nation's plea." "What would Ruxar become if we turned away from our neighbors in time of need?" said Rastus. "Agreed," said Padraig, raising his hands. "General Rastus, I'd like to introduce General Anwar of the Hydrarians." Rastus stood to shake the man's hand. An old scar across Anwar's face was illuminated in the orange glow. "Pleasure to meet you. What befell General Duro? He was not of age to retire from service, no?" "Our kingdoms have suffered greatly as of late," Anwar replied, "with the sudden, tragic death of our King Aldrich. It seems Duro has deserted us. So in the meantime, our new young king, Ulysses, has appointed me his general and advisor." "Both general and advisor? Peculiar for one man to possess both offices," said Rastus. "Well, considering the circumstances, exceptions have been made," said Anwar, his eyes squinting in the firelight. "My country is in mourning, but I am certain, when the time comes, the new king will branch out to find more worthy members of his court." "I can speak for the king, but I, for one, am grateful for both of your nation's support," interjected Padraig. "With that said, let's get to the matter at hand." "Agreed," said Anwar flatly. "Where do we stand with this group of miscreants? I would like to dispatch them swiftly. My men and I must return to Jormungand at the earliest opportunity." "It may not be so simple, General. After all, my countrymen have been pursuing this group of bandits for months with little to show for it. It may take some time to apprehend everyone involved," said Padraig. "How disappointing. Perhaps your king should be more vigilant in preventing such anarchy within his kingdom." Anwar crossed his arms. "Regardless, we will do what we can for as long as I see fit. However, if this endeavor becomes too costly, I will be forced to depart, resolved or not. Am I clear?" "Yes, I understand," stuttered Padraig. Defiance of an equal seemed to send a tremor through the general's core. "So, what do we know about them?" asked Rastus, rolling his eyes secretly at Nestor, signaling annoyance about their present company. Nestor smirked, but stayed silent. "Ah, yes, the group, it seems, is led by a couple, Aradam and Deianira. The pair, as of several months ago, were simple townsfolk. Then one day, their motive is unclear, they used a pair of young Cerberuses to slaughter their neighbours' livestock. Their continued rampage resulted in the burning down of several homes, and they have since murdered dozens, including 2 of our scouts and 3 soldiers. Our most recent reports say the pair have been recruiting. So far, the count is up to 12 members and half that many beasts." "What do they want?" asked Rastus. "We sent scouts to ask for a peaceful meeting," said Padraig. "So far, no humane reply. Both scouts were disemboweled and left for the birds." "Then we must treat them as hostiles. Kill first, imprison second," said Anwar. "No," said Padraig, shaking his head vigorously. "We are to apprehend and detain. There has been enough bloodshed. No harm is to come to the hostiles." Rastus scoffed. "The lunacy. What sort of plan is this? You and your king expect us not to defend ourselves against the monsters? Detaining the men, perhaps, but what of the several Cerberuses who have tasted blood? Human blood. The creatures will want more. In my experience, when man or beast turns on its own, the danger grows for everyone. The king requires us to resolve this peacefully," repeated Padraig, dropping a fist to his side. Rastus stood, stepping forward to Padraig. "No, he requires you to resolve this peacefully. We are not bound by your king. We are here to aid, not to be slaughtered. We will defend ourselves. Your desires be damned." This stopped being a peaceful apprehension when those savages ripped your men apart. General Rastus, I must follow orders, declared Pedreg. General Pedreg, follow your orders if you must. I will protect my kin's welfare from future attacks. Pedreg, said Anwar in a silky voice, how long has it been since you received a report on their growth? A month now, why? Anwar shook his head, irritated. You said it yourself. The two had already recruited both man and beast. Who's to say their numbers are not in the hundreds by now? I am with Rastus on this. If we encounter the renegades, we put them in the ground. Your king is blinded by the distance and security of his walls. Now see here, blurted Pedreg. Nestor stepped forward, interjecting. I will not allow this, General. Who is this? Asked Pedreg. And why does he speak in the General's Council? This is Nestor, one of my best men, and lead beast wrangler, said Rastus. He has a right to speak here if we are all being sent to slaughter. Pedreg huffed at the insult. Fine. Speak. Nestor stood up straight. General Pedreg, sir, if you attempt to restrain our actions in any way, my wranglers, gargoyles, and I will leave you. General Rastus will support me on this. Because looking at the group we have assembled here, the kingdom of Gargoyle has the most to lose, seeing as we are the only ones who had the foresight to bring beasts to fight off rogue Cerberuses. Our men are plenty, and I will not sit idly by while we are killed in droves just to preserve an image of clemency, where decisiveness is required. Pedreg held his nose high. Very well. Then if that is all, I conclude this council of generals. Pedreg turned about and walked toward his men, who were setting up tents in the field. The group of onlookers retreated to their camps. Nestor waited for a moment to speak. Sir, I'm sorry for... You should have held your tongue, Captain, said Rastus. But you're right. If Pedreg thinks he'll resolve this peacefully after what those feral folk have done, he is dead wrong. And we will just be dead. 2 nights blurred past the attention of Nestor's eyes. Marching, patrols, and gradually sharpening senses shaved away his ease. Winks of sleep were the best his mind would grace, just enough to get by during the next half a day of duties and worries. So what's the plan, Captain? Asked Cian. We wait to hear back from their scouts, Nestor replied. If their scouts return, said Torin, I am not certain this is a great idea to be sitting out in the open like this. I agree, said Nestor. Well, then let's move to a secure location. The gargoyles are getting restless, said Cian. Keep them under control, Cian. We move inland at first light. By then we can set up scouting parties of our own, hopefully with better results, said Nestor. I don't like this, Nestor, said Torin. Of the 3 nations, we bring the most soldiers, and we're the only ones who brought beasts? I understand not bringing hydras. They're corralled for our own safety, but the Cerebrians? Why don't they have any of their 3-headed mutts with them? I mean, this is their land, their creatures, so why can't they control them? Perhaps we have, said a female voice in the darkness. Maybe those 3-headed mutts are among those we've lost. A tall woman stepped into the firelight. And you are? Asked Cian with a hint of cynicism. Igni, Cerebrian scout, and I don't much care for what you're insinuating. Well, I wouldn't have to insinuate, said Torin, if your people were less rowdy and can control your dogs. Igni stepped closer, revealing her true height. She stood eye to eye with Torin. Watch your tone, Gargoylean. You wouldn't want to trip over the large tongues of yours. You may fall into something that mistakes you for a meal, a small one at that. Oh, I'll happily step into the drooling jowls of the best dog here, Torin replied. Oh, wait, that must be you. Nestor pushed between the two. All right. We have enough to worry about without starting another conflict among ourselves. Igni eyed Nestor. Keep your man's thoughts under a whisper, Captain. I'd hate to see this one get pummeled before the real fighting begins. Igni turned and strutted back to her side of camp. She does know that we are the same rank, no? Asked Torin. No, said Nestor. And I thought your charm could subdue any woman. Trust me, I'm just as surprised as you. At least she seems capable. said Cian. "We're going to need that fire to finish these renegades with any sort of success." "Agreed," said Nestor. "Now let's turn in. Daybreak is coming, and we need our sleep. And, Cian, keep your ears up. Torn, keep your voice down." Nestor's eyes shut and whisked him away into darkness, a seemingly peaceful quiet, existing only in the confines of his mind. A balance of light and dark formed. A soft yellow glow appeared. Sunlight. Could it be morning already? His mind wandered, groping in the dimly lit corners of his dream. A shout sprang from the distance. Then another. A roar and a screech penetrated the quiet. An image formed. A great beast of 3 monstrous jowls was intertwined in a bout of dominance with winged creatures of equal ferocity. Nestor, exposed, darted for cover. A glance and a sprint brought him to safety, if only for a moment. The forms of men and women soldiers ran for cover, into battle, and into a fate no one desired. The next seconds hastened past his eyes. Another dog-like beast touched down in the soldier's path, unleashing a torrent of wrath, spilling the blood of its enemy with every swipe of its massive claws. Soldiers were torn asunder in small bites, eaten up by their attackers. Shrill screams of agony and fear filled Nestor's mind. His eyes sprang open. His senses flooded his brain with information he could not process. He could still hear the screams. He smelled death, fire. In his chest, tendrils of icy fear gripped him. Moment of pause. His mind settled. Novel awareness swept over him. What he witnessed had not come to fruition, yet an equally terrifying reality was unveiled to him as an enigmatic phantom's hood hiding a milky white skull. Nestor exited his tent, drew his sword, and ran. Fires had started in the surrounding trees. The tall silhouettes cast upon the campsite obscured his vision. Slight movements appeared to leap across the ground. A grunt and shout from behind Nestor surprised him. He ducked, nearly avoiding the sword's deathly kiss. Another swipe sliced, swinging slashes at Nestor. His training kicked in as he retreated from his attacker, blocking and parrying at every chance. Another swift footstep, and Nestor had slid his sword across the man's neck. Down he fell. Nestor's first kill ever. No time to dwell on the weight. With another scan of the campsite, Nestor's vision cleared, the fog of sleep lifted. 3 Cerberuses leaped like frogs on lily pads, blitzing soldiers, ripping up parts of them while consuming the rest. Hydrarian, Cerebrian, and Gargoylean alike were under bombardment, taking losses. Amid the chaos, Nestor landed his sights on Torn and Cian. Torn stood over an injured man, his left arm severed at the elbow. Cian, on the other hand, was standing, giving orders to the 12 gargoyles. "Cian, stop those Cerberuses!" hollered Nestor. He engaged with another man, a wild thing whose hair strayed long, shaggy. Cian ordered the beasts to strike. All 12 winged beasts flew up, creating a whirl of wind. The dust from their combined takeoff allowed Nestor the moment he needed to strike another fatal blow to a marauder. Nestor ran to Torrin and the downed soldier, lifted Torrin away from him, and pushed him to fight. The fallen soldier was gone, and Nestor needed Torrin to stay focused. Within seconds of diverting Torrin's attention, the 12 gargoyles careened out of the sky upon the 3 abominable Cerberuses. 2 Cerberuses came under bombardment by 5 ferocious, gnashing, stabbing, and clawing gargoyles each. The 3-headed beasts growled and thrashed, attempting to grab their new opponents in any way they could. Each gargoyle's strong jaws sank deep into a Cerberus's flesh. Sharpened cobra-like tails stabbed relentlessly, piercing muscles, eyes, and any exposed parts not protected by teeth and claws. Hellish minutes of constant assault resulted in 2 wild Cerberuses succumbing to their injuries, falling hard to the ground. The raiders whistled sharply. Those who remained began to retreat, leaving those still fighting to die. Nestor looked to the 3rd Cerberus. Its thrashing had gained traction, having acquired 1 winged beast between its teeth. It tore into the poor gargoyle while the other continued its ambush. Cian, seeing his precious beast in trouble, sprinted like a parent to his child. "Cian, no!" shouted Nestor, sprinting after his man. "I have to try!" Cian! Cried Torrin, following feverishly. Determined, the Cerberus broke free of both winged warriors. Both beasts collapsed dead on the ground. The Cerberus made one last attempt at freedom, leaping at Cian, landing atop him, its claws ripping into him. Nestor could hear his screams as his flesh was pulled apart. No! Nestor signaled the gargoyles to strike once more. Kill! The remaining 10 soaring savages descended like an angry hive of hornets, striking, ripping, and stabbing at the feral creature. Another short yelp, and the beast fell at last. Nestor and Torrin ran to the dismembered corpse of their friend. Both fell to their knees, placing their heads into their hands. Never had they seen such hatred. Never had they seen such destruction. Never had they felt such loss. Nestor knew he would never be the same. At that moment, he questioned his vow of secrecy. At that instant, he believed his desire to protect those closest would one day be too much to ignore. Daybreak after the attack, Nestor and Torrin buried their friend beside a lone tree in the field. The smoldering remains of foliage set by the marauders stood like a bruise, a lachrymose effigy of loss. The clear skies and crisp air did little to settle the soldiers' nerve over the raid. Still, despite failure, action, not sorrow, would avenge the fallen. 3 Cerberuses and 8 renegades perished in the battle, reported Padraig. What are our losses? Asked Rastus. Nestor, what are our counts? My men count for 4 dead, 6 injured, added Anwar. Nestor stirred with guilt and sadness. Composed on the surface, he was trembling beneath like a calm ocean concealing a deadly riptide. 2 gargoyles, 5 dead, sir, including Cian, our wrangler. 3 wounded. A dull tremor lingered in his hand, his steady arm cradling it as a sickly newborn. Rastus bowed his head in Cian's memory. How could this have happened? We need better intel. Our reports said nothing of them attacking at night, let alone with a force as large as ours, Padraig replied. Your handling of this situation has been careless, said Anwar. Now see here, Padraig replied. No, Anwar is right, and now many are dead. This is your fault. You let this happen, said Rastus with an accusatory finger. Padraig's mouth tightened against the sour taste of the insult. We will call for aid. Call all the aid you wish. I have already sent for mine, said Rastus. This must be handled before the criminals move farther north. Nestor stepped forward. Generals. Why do you still speak when not addressed, Captain? Groaned Padraig. Shut it, Padraig, said Rastus. Now is not the time for platitudes and manners. Let him speak. Thank you, sir, said Nestor, collecting himself. It seems to me that not only are the marauders gaining more fighters, but last night they appeared to be migrating south. We may want to head them off at the nearest settlement. The group grows bolder, stronger. You said it yourself. They haven't attacked a force of our size before. We must be bold too. But we must also bring reinforcements to contain them before your entire country looks like this camp, a smoldering graveyard. Padraig stared down Nestor, his eyes unblinking. Agreed. General, what do you propose? I propose nothing that Nestor here hasn't already mentioned. In fact, I have already sent 2 messengers back to Gargoyle for reinforcements. In a week or so, we will have more men and beasts to combat these renegades. Padraig nodded at the news. Anwar, what of Hydraria? Will you stay? We will. I am not, however, sending for more troops. This is all we will be sacrificing for your impudence. Padraig lowered his eyes like a broken dog. Ready the troops. We ride south. Peace engulfed Nestor, existing only in the corners of his mind, a balance of light and dark formed. The soft, yellow glow materialized. Sunlight. Midday. His mind wandered, groping in the blinding light of his vision. A shout sprang from the distance. Then another. A roar and a screech penetrated the quiet. An image formed. Great beasts of 3 monstrous jowls were intertwined in a bout for dominance with winged creatures of equal ferocity. The forms of soldiers were running into battle, into a fate no one craved. The next seconds flashed like lightning past his eyes. Cerberuses were unleashing a deluge of wrath, spilling the blood of their enemy with every swipe of their massive claws. Soldiers were torn asunder, into small bites eaten up by their attackers. Nestor woke, sweating amid the fading vision. He knew the event would occur, but when? All he knew was to push for the defenses without divulging his information's origin. He rose from his tent. The morning sun was still low in the sky. A breeze rustled the grass and leaves. The birds sang their melodious tunes. Soldiers woke and prepared for the day's search for the bandits. Nestor, however, ignored their hustle and bustle. He had a different mission this morning. Nestor found the general and approached purposefully. General Rastus, we need to discuss strategy. Rastus stepped toward his captain. In regards to? Our defenses, sir. We were taken by surprise in the middle of the night. I want to prevent another attack. I understand. I've already set up night watches. Gargoyles are our best defense. They'll watch the perimeter. Yes, I understand, but what of the day? They would not be so brazen as to attack a military camp in broad daylight. I wouldn't be so sure. They have proven that a nighttime attack is ineffective, and a midday attack seems more likely given the types of creatures we have. Explain, Captain. The enemy knows our capabilities now. Our beasts are most active from dusk until just before midday. Most gargoyles sleep deep when the sun is highest. The Cerebrian renegades could know this, and the other 2 armies did not bring beasts to cover the hours the gargoyles rest. Explained Nestor, thinking now of Cien. For our sake, sir, add more men to the border during the day. Wake a gargoyle or 2 now. We're not even in a true town. We have barriers. Wagons and wooden boxes are not barriers. You saw it yourself. Those Cerberus would leap right over them and destroy all of us like fawns. They will not attack at midday, Captain. That is enough talk. I need to go check in with the scouts. We should be expecting more troops any day now. Nestor sighed with frustration. Yes, sir. Rastus stepped away. Nestor watched as his general walked to the back camp to meet with the scouts arriving from Gargolia. Nestor turned his attention to finding Torin. He and Nestor would have to take care of this issue themselves. A quick jog around the measly defenses landed his man in his sight. Torin! Morning, Nestor, Torin said dully. We have to talk. What about? You all right? No, I can't get Cien's face out of my mind. He was helpless. That Cerberus just tore him apart. Nestor's memory shot back to the moment of the attack. I know. And what we have to discuss involves preventing more deaths. What? How? We need to increase security at camp. We need to wake up a gargoyle if we can. I feel a midday attack is imminent. Talk to Rastus. I did. He's not going to do anything. He is the general, Nestor. He makes the decisions. Regardless, we need to increase patrols. We need to be ready. What do you expect me to do? Yes, what indeed? Asked Igni, sauntering toward the 2 men. Nestor here believes we should increase defenses, said Torin. And you don't believe him? Asked Igni. I'm skeptical, said Torin. But what makes you think there's going to be an attack? We fought them off last time. The renegades are getting bolder. My instincts are telling me there is more to this. I can't put my finger on it. And now that they know the use of gargoyles, they'll know what time of day we are at our weakest, said Igni. Exactly. Spread the word. Do it quietly, said Nestor. We need archers on the perimeter. Carry weapons at all times. Warn the Hydrarian soldiers as well. I'll do what I can about waking a few gargoyles. Nestor turned and took off for the beast pen. Waking gargoyles, is that a good idea? Asked Igni. Torin stood up straight and exhaled loudly. No, it's a terrible idea. But if anyone's going to do it right, it's Nestor. After hours of working, Nestor finally succeeded in rousing 3 of the 10 gargoyles. Enticing them with fresh chicken and rotting fish proved powerful enough to lure some of them out of their slumber. The 3 lumbered like drunks outside under the midday sun. Nestor found some shade and placed the shreds of animal meat on the ground for the beasts to enjoy. Over time, he hoped to make this a permanent adjustment for several of the flying creatures. Then a blaring whistle hung in the air, faint but distinct. The familiar shrill originated from outside camp. Nestor fed the creatures more feathered feed, then ran to the front of camp. He crossed paths with Igni and Torin. "What's happening?" Igni stood tall on her toes. "It's 2 people, a man and a woman." "You don't think?" asked Torin. "Yes, Torin, it's the leaders," said Nestor, now sprinting to Rastus. "Captain, what is it?" asked Rastus. "What I warned you about, General," said Nestor, panting. "Assemble the troops. Prepare the gargoyles. I'll alert the other generals." "Troops are all ready, sir, and I woke 3 gargoyles, sir." "You disobeyed me?" "Yes, sir. I'm sorry, but I had to follow my instincts." "Captain!" yelled Rastus, frustrated. "Damn it, I don't appreciate being disobeyed. On the other hand, you will make a great general one day. Now let's go see what they want." "Aye, sir," agreed Nestor, relieved. Rastus dispatched a soldier to warn the clueless generals. Troops, already prepared, threw the blanket of secrecy off of their actions. Nestor followed Rastus up the front. Igni and Torin had assembled a firing line. A group of more than 20 archers stood in preparation. "Nestor, those other gargoyles better wake up. We may need them," said Rastus. "I've tried for hours, sir, only 3 rows." "How long until the others wake?" 2 hours at the earliest." "Damn." General Padraig appeared. "Perhaps they desire to discuss their surrender," he said. "That's lunacy," said Nestor. "Watch your tone with me, Captain, or I'll make sure you—" "What, become dog meat?" snapped Nestor, locking eyes with him. "General, that may happen regardless of what you do to me. We need to focus. Where are the Hydrarians?" asked Rastus. Torin looked around nervously. "Sir, it appears that General Anwar took his forces. They abandoned us." "Blast them! Damn him!" said Rastus. "General, sir," said Igni, "Torin and I have prepared the weapons and even gathered material to mix batches of dragon's breath should the worst happen." "Good work. Now let's hear them out." Rastus climbed over the low boxes, crossing the barrier from camp to the open field. His walk was slow, but deliberate. 2 archers followed him, arrows taut at the ready. Nestor, on the other hand, escorted the 3 roused gargoyles to the front. "Are they ready to fight?" asked Torin. "I honestly don't know," said Nestor. "I've never asked this of gargoyles before." "So we could be attacked and eviscerated by giant 3-headed hounds while our deadly gargoyles watch?" "Yes." Torin covered his eyes. "I should have been a fisherman." Rastus approached the 2 leaders, his sword sheathed but keeping a close eye on the 2 large Cerebrians. The woman stood a head taller than Rastus. Her trim build did little to disguise her physique. Defined muscles like chiseled stone mocked the general's softer build. Her striking copper eyes were the color of the sky on fire. Her intentions were clear to Rastus. No surrender. The man seemed to touch the sky. His biceps protruded like the thickest stumps. A dull expression of satisfaction held firm across his brow. The unblinking eyes of a man who knew his mission, a man who knew not the word defeat. "What do you want?" asked Rastus. The man chuckled. "Straight to the point. How rude." "What my lover means is he is Aradam, and I am Deianira. We are here to discuss your surrender." "Surrender?" Rastus scoffed. "Here I thought it would be you who would stop this madness." "We will stop when the kingdom lets us govern our own people, free of their rules and so-called protection," said Deianira. "So, that's it then? Independence from the Cerebrian kingdom. You want to defect. That's after you've burned down homes, killed civilians, and attacked soldiers. You're bringing war to your home, to your people." "No, he is why," Aradam replied, lifting his boulder-sized chin behind the general. He? Asked Rastus, glancing back to camp. Padraig, said Aradam. I don't understand. What do you want with General Padraig? I want to watch him die. Slowly. Painfully. You're not going to get him. He's the general of an army, said Rastus. He's a coward, and he's guilty. Answer me this. If he is the leader, then why are you out here holding counsel with his enemy? Rastus' brow furrowed. Regardless, you're not killing him. Enough blood has been spilled. Then we will kill every last one of you who defend him and claim him ourselves, declared Deianira. I won't let you do this. It's not up to you, Deianira replied. His death was assured the moment he murdered my children. He is many things, but Padraig is no child killer, said Rastus aghast. It was his scouts who came into our land. It was his Cerberuses they rode upon, and it was my babies those mongrels murdered before my own eyes, said Deianira, wiping away a single tear. Those scouts never even paid for their Cerberus' actions. We went to the king himself, demanding justice, and nothing, said Aradam. Padraig was there. He sat there, ignorant of his men's crimes. Rastus shook his head in disgust and sadness. In a sympathetic tone, he said, What you have suffered is most tragic, but killing and pillaging recklessly is no way to memorialize your lost children. The king called it a terrible accident. He assured us nothing so awful would occur again. Deianira sniffled, rubbing away another fallen tear. No, it wouldn't. We'd make certain of it. I can call for his arrest, said Rastus. He will be tried and prosecuted for his carelessness. We try to be civil. We won't let our baby's death go unpunished. We don't want your justice. We want ours. A clang of steel and a sudden rush from Aradam found Rastus. The slash severed the general's head from his shoulders. The release of both archers' arrows was too late. Aradam stood staring at the headless body as both arrows pierced his neck and heart, dropping him to the ground atop his last victim. Ah! Blared Deianira, evolving her shout into a war cry. Kill them all! From behind a small ridge emerged the remainder of the renegade force. Dozens of more men and women warriors, accompanied by 3 more Cerberuses, swarmed the field, all sprinting toward the small encampment. The archers drew again, firing off another volley. Deianira never took her eyes off of them. With one fluid motion, she dove beneath the arrow's arc, landing at the soldiers' feet. She stood slicing her sword up their legs. Cries of pain echoed, frightening a squall of blackbirds. Deianira waited another moment. The 3 Cerberuses bounded over her, lunging for fresh meat at the other side of the barriers. Volley fire! Cried Igni. Swords! Shouted Torin. Gargoyles, attack! Ordered Nestor. With little between the 2 small forces, a maelstrom of claws, swords, arrows, and screams closed the gap. Each barely conscious gargoyle engaged its own 3-headed opponent. Nestor drew his sword, waiting helplessly for attackers to pour over the barrier. Archer volleys rained down lethal raindrops. Several attacking warriors fell dead before reaching the camp. Other, larger Cerebrines took the arrows as an insult to their strength, running faster toward their own doom. With 7 renegades left, they vaulted over the wall, hacking at anything. Screams and blood became the themes of the day. Soldiers and warriors tore each other apart, defending themselves beyond anything anyone had ever experienced. Meanwhile, the gargoyles screeched and ripped wildly at the mammoth Cerberuses. Each gargoyle was on the back of a hound, its claws sunk deep into flesh and muscle. Deianira joined the battle. Bring me Padraig! Nestor stepped forth to challenge the woman who had taken part in Rastus and Cian's deaths. You are going to die for what you did. No, I won't, said Deianira, but I'm going to enjoy watching you try to kill me. The 2 met at a bladed edge. Each sword strained to gain favor over the other. A chime clanged as Nestor slid down her sword with his. A flurry of overhead slashes berated Nestor. Chips of metal flew like shrapnel as his defense held. Deianira kicked him, knocking him to the ground, exposed. A single stroke and he was finished. Deianira drew her arm back to deliver the death blow, only to be blocked by another. Torrhen's pale face spoke of his fear, but still he held his gaze against the savage warrior. Deianira lunged and struck at him, landing a slash across his shoulder. Torrhen fell, holding himself, his blood seeping onto his shirt. "Nestor, I'm sorry," said Torrhen, just as Deianira thrust her sword down into his weakening body. Igni tackled the madwoman. Her strength overwhelmed Deianira. The two women grappled and fought for dominance over her sword. Nestor got back to his feet, rushed to Torrhen's side, and applied pressure to the wound. As he looked around, he could see the feral renegades had fallen. Many were staked to the ground by swords. Others were impaled with arrows. Nestor stood up his wounded friend. Even paler now, Torrhen chose to continue the battle, jumping in to help Igni. The fight still raged on against the beasts. All three pairs continued to thrash and fight. A weariness began to set into the creatures. Each beast bled profusely, its skin and fur taking on a scarlet hue. Nestor needed to rally the men. The battle was not done. He searched for Padraig, nowhere in sight. With the Hydrarians gone and Rastus dead, he decided that today was a day to become the leader they needed. "Archers, volley, fire!" said Nestor. Archers and warriors alike, still stunned from battling men, were now rallying themselves to fight one more combatant. "Archers, aim for their heads, aim for their hearts!" At last, several archers gathered themselves and began pummeling the Cerberuses with arrows. One by one, they succumbed to incredible and impossible wounds. Nestor diverted his attention to the last warrior of the renegade clan, Deianira. She knelt, her hair balled in Igni's fist. "What will we do with her?" she asked. "Kill her!" shouted one soldier. "Cut off her head like they did to Rastus!" shouted another. Nestor stepped in front of Deianira, squatted, and said, "No. She will be taken to the king, for he is the lord of these lands, not me." "I'm so glad to hear that, Captain," said Padraig, quivering as he emerged from hiding. "The king will appreciate the justice and mercy shown here." "And what about justice for her children?" asked Nestor. "That was an unfortunate tragedy," said Padraig. "Everything about your leadership has been an unfortunate tragedy, General," said Nestor, seething. "Now excuse me. I'm taking what's left of my army home, and you can count on me discussing in full the severity of your integrity and cowardice." "But, Captain," bleated Padraig. "Don't captain me, damn it. Why, I have half a mind to let her finish the job she came here to do, but I believe you'll do better to share her fate." Nestor took a sharp breath. "Men, arrest him." Igni and two other Cerebrians stepped behind their former general, bound his wrists, and started their tainted journey home. Chapter 9. Promises and Memories. Nestor, son of Leah and Jair, man of Gargoyle and its army, these past months have challenged us as a people. However, your dedication and iron will have held us strong during these trying times of a leaderless army. I am proud at last to promote you to the rank of general. Your acts of heroism and leadership in dire times have proved to be undeniable assets. I know that, with time, you will continue to share your talents and better our nation's security. Now rise, General Nestor of Gargoyle, said King Xenos, gesturing upward. The room of armored soldiers littered the hall. Clapping flooded the room, sounding like waves crashing ashore. As the applause dulled, Nestor descended the few stairs to the main floor. A path formed, lined with soldiers, his men, his army. Nestor walked slowly to the back of the main hall, where he was met by his wife, Phaedra, and young son, Orion. "Congratulations, darling," said Phaedra.
Father, does it mean You are in charge of everyone now?
asked Orion. Nestor chuckled. Almost. Orion squinted and tilted his head.
Who's in charge of you?
Nestor looked at Phaedra, then back to his young son. I report to King Xenos, but your mother is the one who is really in charge. Orion looked back to his mother.
You're the boss?
Phaedra displayed her best humble smile. Yes, I'm pleased that your father understands this even after today,
I don't get it.
said Orion, shaking his head as he walked between his parents out of the great hall. Trust me, son, said Nestor. You won't understand until you are very old. Even then, you will be lucky to comprehend the complexity that is marriage.
When did he finally understand?
Asked Orion. Nestor smiled. Oh, son, it still confounds me. Now let's go home and talk about how confused your old man is. Young Orion stepped into his bedroom, followed closely by his parents. Nestor lifted his son, raising him high above the bed. Then they barreled down onto the bed together, laughing. Phaedra smiled, shook her head, and then took her place with her husband and son on top of the mattress.
Father, why did he join the army?
Asked Orion. Nestor, taken aback. That's a big question for such a little boy.
I am not that little, Father. I have grown as tall as Mother's shoulder. I take care of her hair, too. I am nearly a man now,
said Orion, sitting tall in his bed. Nestor and Phaedra grinned widely at their 7-year-old son. Oh, yes, I believe I even see small hairs growing on that smooth face of yours, said Phaedra. By next week, I'll have to teach you how to shave, said Nestor, winking to Phaedra. Orion hopped into Nestor's lap.
Please, Father, please tell me why.
Nestor at last gave in to his son's pleas. To be honest, son, I joined the army because I wanted to help. I needed to be a part of something. I wanted to travel and meet new people.
Like Mother?
Asked Orion. Nestor chuckled. Yes, we would not have met if I hadn't joined. He would still be on his farm with your grandparents, said Phaedra, smirking, surrounded by gargoyles, bored stiff by the lack of excitement, and with no son or wife to keep him busy.
What else, Father?
What else?
What else made you join?
Nestor thought for a moment. Your Uncle Conrad, said Nestor. Since he was my oldest brother, he was always berating me and your Uncle Aram to do more chores, be more vigilant, behave respectfully. He'd go on and on. I always thought he nagged at us to be mean, but now I know he was preparing us for our lives just as much as my mother and father were. Then the day he left for the army, I felt a pull to follow him. All the years of nagging fell away, and I realized I wanted to be just like him.
I bet he is so proud of you now, Father,
said Orion. Nestor sighed. Yes, I imagine he is. Come now, darling, it's time for bed. It has been a long day, and you need your rest, said Phaedra.
Okay, Mother,
Orion replied.
One more question, Father. Will you be leaving now you are a general?
The two parents exchanged a look. Oh, son, I'm not going anywhere. I will always be here for you and your mother, no matter what. Orion wrinkled his little brow.
What about the hair?
Nestor leaned in and whispered, especially Faher. But you, my boy, are the most important person in my life. I won't let anything get in the way of being with you.
Promise?
Asked Orion. I promise, Nestor replied. Orion smiled. The answer calmed the young boy's mind. He snuggled into the bedclothes, resting his head on the pillow. Nestor and Phaedra kissed their son goodnight, extinguished the candle, and exited the bedroom. Conrad would have loved him, whispered Phaedra. Nestor nodded. He would have. I see a bit of my older brother in our boy. How I would have loved for him to have met Orion before his passing. Blasted fever. Phaedra placed her hand on Nestor's shoulder, leaned in, and hugged him strong. The thought of his older brother brought Nestor great sadness, but the unknown future of what his generalship had in store for him made him uneasy. He could only hope that the promise that he had made to his son would remain intact for the many years to come. 10 years passed. One day, Nestor entered the throne room. His fresh eyes had by now developed slight bags. Half circles beneath his lids were stained with a water hue of purple. Stress and the burden of responsibility had chipped away the cheery man's exterior, replacing it with a reticent demeanor. Topping off a decade of transformation lived a thinning top of hair, more salt than pepper. "General Nestor, welcome," said King Xenos, seated at a table and not raising his eyes from the document he was reading. "Thank you, sire." "Where are we today with the news within the kingdom?" "Well, your majesty, there is an uncanny absence of news to report this morning." Xenos cocked his head up from the map he was examining. "Nothing? Really?" "Yes, sir. Nothing to report. Gargoyles and soldiers alike are settled into their routines and training. The conflict to the east concerning dueling dragons has been handled by our neighbors there, and the weather is calm with no storm fronts on the horizon." "Excellent. Then I will see you in the morning, General." "Yes, sir," said General, saluting and turning to leave. Just before exiting, he turned around to face Xenos again. "I do have one question for you, my king, if you'll allow it." Xenos looked up again from his map. "Yes, General." "Please excuse my prying eyes, but I have observed of late your fascination with this map here," said Nestor, approaching the table-sized document. "May I inquire as to its significance?" Xenos sighed and gestured toward the parchment. "This, General, is the future of Gargoyle." "The future, sire?" "My father's vision for Gargoyle and its place among the rest of Ruxar." Nestor took in the details of the map. The parchment was dotted with the infrastructure of towns, cities, and an expanded capital. Roadways and ports for trade were drawn to connect with other countries and a great expansion of the empire. "This is incredible. Quite the visionary, my father." "I only knew him for a moment in time," said Nestor. "He seemed an honorable man. You were fortunate to have such a father." "Sadly, his title as king held his attention more than his title of father." "I know the feeling," replied Nestor. "How? You are no king." "No, but a general has similar burdens, my liege." "Not nearly as many as king, for a king rules over an entire kingdom. He is constantly at his subjects and armies ever beck and call, and his family suffers." "I understand. I've observed your day-to-day over these past 10 years. I do not question you or your father's dedication to the throne or Gargoyle." "What are you saying, General?" "I am merely stating that given the title of either, sacrifices are made to uphold one's duty. Surely you can agree that a burden comes with both our roles within the kingdom." Xenos thought for a moment. "I suppose so, yes. I'm sure you are referring to your time with your family." "What else would it be?" "Don't forget your place, General." "My apologies, sir," said Nestor, disappointed by the tone he had taken with the king. "Oh, General, it's quite all right. I'm not myself today. Pawning over this map has brought up old memories, light and dark." "Sir?" "My father, King Zun, great man though he was a cursed man." "Cursed?" "Nightmares." Nestor stood straighter at the mention of the word. "Nightmares, sir." "The Gargoyles Gift?" Xenos scoffed. "Gift. More like a death sentence." Xenos turned toward the wall where his throne sat and dropped his head. Heavy thoughts filled his mind. As a young man, he was strong. The nightmares started in his early time as king. They came from the gargoyles that roamed the castles. The bloodlines we bred conjured images of blood and dread, death, sadness. But like many great leaders, he rose up. He turned the frightening images and fear-filled nights into strength, a sort of impenetrable fear, an armor for the mind, if you will. What happened to him? One moment he was well, and the next you took up his mantle. It seemed like he had vanished. He didn't vanish, General. I found him one night. He climbed the top of the Gargoyle Tower. He visited there often. This night was different. He was different. At the time, he had endured nightmares with no issue, but several nights prior, he had mentioned a terror of great magnitude, a terror that felt so real to him that he thought it real. In his nightmare, he saw the end of Gargoyle, the end of his family, the end of Ruxar itself. A fear swept over him like sickness. He felt he could not change what he saw. His hold on reality dwindled to such a state that when he entered the Gargoyle Tower that night, he found the most dangerous beast and attacked it, as if he were a gargoyle himself. It took only a second for that beast to tear him apart. Our king, my father, was dead. We kept it quiet from the people. We said he died from an unknown illness, but we knew what he died from. His own mind, poisoned with fear, drove him into that pen that night. His affliction, was it isolated to him? Xenos turned around now, facing Nestor. No, I too possess the same curse, as does my only son, Darren. I had no idea. It is something we must live with for the rest of our days. I fear I'll lose myself and my boy the same way. Falling into madness is not a beautiful death. There is no honor in it. So when I found this map, I decided to make as much use of it as I could with the time I had left. You have decades, sire. The curse affects everyone uniquely. My son, for instance, has never had a nightmare he hasn't laughed at. He is the strongest of us. He will outlive us all. I feel the same way about my son. He has a curiosity that outshines even mine at his age. How old? Nearly 17. My Darren is 2 years older. The challenge of being a father never goes away, does it? The worry stays with you when the love is strong. True words, General. Will that be all? One more item. My family and I will be relocating to my hometown in Darnus. Xenos eyed Nestor. What are you moving there for? What of your duties? Do not worry, my king. I will mostly remain here, but the sudden passing of my parents has opened up the need for us to take care of the family land. Xenos' expression softened. I see. That will have to do for now. Ensure your subordinates understand your orders before you part. Understood. Thank you, General. Will that be all? Yes, sir, said Nestor, turning about again and making his way out of the room. As Nestor entered the hallway, a messenger intercepted his path. With a rush of worry and sweat upon his brow, the man pushed the communication into Nestor's hand. Sighing deeply, Nestor opened the letter, skimmed it, and promptly re-entered the throne room. It turned out that a quiet day in the kingdom was a rarity indeed. Chapter 10. Sleeplessness. The letter brought news of violent gargoyles wreaking havoc throughout the land. Scouts were commissioned to investigate every report in the kingdom. Many never returned. Those who did told escalating stories of the flying beasts attacking livestock, gnawing at their own flesh, and eviscerating villagers and other beasts alike. Never before had an issue of this magnitude arisen. Nestor and the king hastened to dispatch the entire army to find a solution to the horrifying problem, hitherto only seen in the nightmares of the cursed. General Nestor, what are your orders? Asked Captain Tig. We split our forces. You will be taking command of the eastern route. Captain Hamill will take the north route. I will be traveling south with the prince, replied Nestor. And the west, sir? No reports have come from the west. What are we to do if we encounter one of those feral gargoyles? Asked Captain Hamill. Either capture it or kill it. Use your best judgment. The safety of our people is a priority. Each of us will be escorted by our best wranglers. They will provide some security from the creatures. And if we catch one, what then? Asked Captain Tig. Cage it. We're working out a way to heal these animals. Prince Darren and I have been discussing the local plant life. We have some theories on how to resolve this matter. Our gargoyles are too valuable to eradicate on a whim. But remember, if the best course of action is to eliminate the beast, then do so swiftly. These are not normal gargoyles anymore. They are incredibly dangerous. I don't have to remind either of you of the incident involving one of these depraved beasts in the Capitol Gardens, do I? No, sir, said the captains in unison. Good. Then I send you off with my best wishes, said Nestor. The two captains nodded and proceeded with their orders. The months that followed would test them all. Nestor, the gargoyles are on patrol. Tonight seems like it will be a quiet one. Good. And that's general to you. It'll never be general when we're alone, said Torin. Nestor grinned. Still haven't come to terms with my promotion? It's been over 10 years, brother. Well, excuse me for remembering the man who mucked out stalls and drank with me until we could barely see straight. We still made it to guard duty, didn't we? Yes, and then fell asleep at our posts after vomiting in the middle of the castle square. Hey now, we cleaned it up. Only after Thorn kicked our asses awake and told us to scoop up our bile with our hands. Oh, we stunk. Nestor laughed deeply. I haven't forgotten. When you visit next, try to avoid telling that story around Phaedra and Orion. I don't need the boy to get ideas, and Phaedra already knows too much about me. Prince Darren approached the two men. His abrupt entrance and laconic speech personified a strong demeanor. Good day, General. I found our solution. Nestor rose from his seat. What have you found? Observed, corrected Prince Darren. All right. Observed. What did you see? Asked Nestor. A sleeplessness. Go on. Torn entered the conversation. What sleeplessness? The gargoyles? Prince Darren shot an annoyed look at Torn. What else? Torn raised his hands in surrender. Okay, what about it? The last group I observed over 3 days' travel. Darren replied. The beasts did not sleep. Didn't sleep? That's preposterous. Gargoyles sleep. They have to. If they don't, they'll go insane and die? Yes, interrupted Darren. This sickness is killing them, creating many weeks of insomnia-laden insanity before the beasts drop dead. So what is this sickness? Asked Nestor. Some sort of insomnia, perhaps. A fatal illness, it appears, said Darren. So you're proposing a simple solution, I imagine, said Nestor. Yes, Darren replied. Herbs in our region given to the sick creatures will put them to sleep. Then, with some luck, they will awake healthy once more. How sure are you this will work? Asked Torrin. Not fully. This is only a theory, said Darren. It's the closest answer we've had, said Nestor. Torrin, send a messenger out to the king. Alert farmers to begin the process of growing and harvesting the somnum weed. We need enough to cure those we have captured and many more. I've already sent the scribe to write up the message, General, Darren said. Good work, Nestor replied. See, Torrin, there are people who still respect my role as general. Torrin turned with a smirk. I respectfully disagree, Nestor. Sleeplessness is especially bad for gargoyles. Sleep's deep connection with the mind is powerful, but not invincible. These flying hunters of the dark became confused about what was fantasy and what was reality when exposed to the sickness that plagued the country. The gargoyle caretakers developed a remedy that permitted the paranoid creatures to sleep, in turn effectively curing the illness. Prince Darren had been correct. However, the longer a gargoyle remained awake, the stronger and more unpredictable it became, right up until its untimely demise. The morning sun traveled fast across the sky. The line of troops marched forward. In its center were 3 cages, each carrying sickly cargo. Gargoyles ravaged by sleeplessness clawed, chewed, and howled wildly behind metal bars. Their eyes, normally yellow, had transformed to a sickly red. Each beast wore scars from their capture and prior misadventures. All were secure on their way to receiving the antidote. I'm certain this is it, said Torrin. We have scoured these lands and heard fewer and fewer tales of sick gargoyles. It seems our mission is a success, said Nestor gladly. Well, we have Prince Dark and Leary to thank for that, said Torrin. Oh, please, said Nestor. He's a valuable asset to the Gargoylean kingdom. At least call him by his real name. Torrin shook his head. Not going to happen. You are so petty. Petty or wise? Nestor thought for a second. Definitely petty. The two old friends chuckled. It's too bad our supply ran out for these last three, said Torin. It takes a large number of herbs to calm them. We were unaware when we discovered its usefulness. I'll just be happy when we finally get rid of the angry buggers and I can head home. Igni gets restless when I'm away. Nestor smiled. I'm glad you two found each other. Torin returned the smile. So am I. It only took nearly dying in Cerebria for a girl to find me alluring enough to stick around for more than one night. Because all of those other girls walked away, huh, old friend? Perhaps not all of them, said Torin, smirking. By the way, be on the lookout for King Xenos, said Nestor. He sent a letter. He wants to meet us on the road. I'm sure he wants to hear all about the prince's activities while away. Suddenly, a huff and sharp clicks jingled about. Oh no, get the door, the cage door, said Torin. The bars on the cage vibrated, clanging hard against themselves as one of the gargoyles sprang loose from its confinement, darting into the field of tall grass. Defensive positions, ordered Nestor, drawing his sword. Where is it? Asked Torin. Quiet, replied Nestor. Where is the bastard? Asked one clamoring soldier. Be quiet, damn you, said Nestor, growing nervous within the absence of chaos. The gargoyle's shard-like tail danced as a cobra among the tall golden grass. It slunk through the grass like a cat. Then, like lightning it struck. Thunderous screams followed by raindrops of blood landed upon clean helms. Peace became havoc being wreaked. A natural disaster with teeth and fangs whipped about, snatching up soldiers by their heads and limbs, dragging them until separating at the joint. Its sharp, sword-like tail cut men to pieces. Only seconds went by before 3 men who were once standing were laid in ruin upon the blood-soaked earth. Bows! Ordered Nestor. Fire at will! Soldiers grasping their bows were being cut down before an arrow could be strung. The beast pounced, lacerated, and mauled the men into ground meat, suitable only for worms. Nestor and Torin stood in shock as the beast ravaged soldiers like they were mice in a den of snakes. Torin, release the gargoyles! Save our men! Without answering, Torin unsaddled himself and ran to the holding pens. There, 5 gargoyles sat in similar fashion, behind bars, asleep. Damn it! Said Torin, climbing up into the unlocked cages. Wake up! We need help! People are dying! Darren, already witnessing his people being ripped apart, immediately began to sprint around like the gargoyle. Erratic movements to contradict erratic movements. His acrobatics were graceful as he unsheathed his sword and shield. Darren trailed the beast, keeping up with the swift hunter, staying within 3 paces of the creature. Every pace greeted him with even more scarlet and screaming comrades. At last, arrows began flying, whizzing past Darren like deadly hummingbirds. With his nerve as strong as iron, he began to gain on the delusional animal. The prince, now within striking distance, swung his blade, hitting the animal, wounding it. The deranged gargoyle returned the lashings by snapping around like a whip cracking. Lunging now at Darren, its claws, teeth, and tail fought to land flesh, but Darren would not let it. He parried, blocked, countered, and slashed, drawing blood, breaking the beast down. Make way! Halt! Make room for our gargoyle! Said Nestor. Darren's eyes glided away from the beast for the breath of a moment. Enough time for the gargoyle to sense a break in concentration, striking right through the prince. The mad animal had just enough fight left in it to rip him open. Darren grappled with the animal, choking its narrow neck, pointing its toothy mouth to the ground, smothering itself in dirt and blood. The 2 worthy warriors fell side by side, dead. Get a doctor! Cried one soldier. I need bandages, herbs, help! Cried another soldier, doing his best to keep the prince's entrails within him. No, damn monster! Said another one. He is gone. The prince is dead. Nestor rode in close, then slipped off his horse and stumbled over to where the prince lay, his body a heap. The dead gargoyle next to him still writhed and jerked about as its muscles failed to gain enough energy to continue on. We must cover him, Preserve him, said Nestor. The king will be joining us soon. He will want to see his son. What will we use? Asked the soldier. Nestor stripped his cape from his armor, spread it in the air, and draped it on the young prince. The prince should be shrouded in the colors of his kingdom, especially in death. Nestor stood, face pallid, eyes falling on the gruesome details of the quick and costly bout. His prince and a dozen of his soldiers were among the deceased. A moment of silence stilled his men. He ordered for the remains to be placed gingerly on the side of the road and covered with cloth. No Gargoylean should die alone, nor be left in a dishonorable fashion, said Nestor, struggling to compose himself through his speech. We will honor these men, for not one of them, no matter rank or place in life, is any less important than another. Once the last of the men were settled, the king's carriage arrived. Its wheels rattled as it inched closer to the stopped troop of soldiers. The next voice Nestor heard was that of the good King Xenos, wailing mournful cries of damnation and sadness. The cries of a king in mourning, of a broken man, of a father torn in two, cradling his son's broken body, never to be whole again. The throne room sat in silence, awaiting King Xenos. Rows of guards lined the walls, standing inches apart. The chamber's great doors yawned open, allowing the entire royal court passage to the head of the room, next to the very throne itself. Nestor entered at the rear of the line, unsure of the reason behind this sudden call to congregate. Attention, please. Presenting our beloved ruler, King Xenos of Gargoyle, announced the herald. All eyes moved to the door, their pupils cemented on the empty entrance. With a swish and heavy steps, in plodded the king himself. Nestor thought something seemed different about him. His normal, calm and confident demeanor had been replaced by that of a dysfunctional vagabond, playing at being royalty. Arise! Shouted the king. But, my lord, they have already done so, said the herald. Of course. I knew that. I have eyes too, you know. Nestor had not seen the king for nearly a year. In that time, Darren had been buried and his passing mourned. The king, so it appeared, had become a recluse. Reports from inside the castle had described his torturous grief. His son's death had brought terrible nightmares that had broken the indestructible king's will. For the same madness that had consumed his father had now curled its grimy fingers around him. Welcome, my guests, hollered King Xenos, taking the center of the room as his stage. I imagine you all are here wondering. The room remained silent, watching the king saunter oddly in circles. Wondering why you are here. Are you all wondering this? Every head in the room began nodding, eyes squinted. Confused expressions filled the faces of everyone in the room. Yes, your majesty, we are all wondering, said the herald, breaking the silence. Excellent! For a moment, I thought I was talking to myself, said Xenos. His gaze suddenly drifted to a painting on the other end of the room. His mouth grew wide. He cocked his head to one side and then another. My king, said the herald, you were saying? Don't you interrupt me when I am talking, especially in front of my guests. You, sir, are insolent, cried the king. Yes, in fact, I don't believe I recognize you. But, sire, I've been the herald in this very castle since your father's time. I even announced at— Silence! Cried the king. Guards, take this impostor away. Guards assigned to the throne room hesitated. The four men looked at one another in uncertainty. Finally, one's gaze found his general. Nestor shook his head in stunned bewilderment. The presence of the king's deteriorating state churned Nestor's stomach. Guards! Damn you! Arrest him! Arrest this man! Yelled Xenos, amplifying his threats. He must be taken away and fed to the beasts in the tower! What? No! I don't understand! cried the herald. "Stop this!" Nestor demanded, now stepping out of formation. "Guards, belay the king's command." "Why, General Nestor," Xanos said, his tone sugared with sweet, sickly reverence. "It has been many months since I have laid my eyes on you." His sweet tone mutated into a savage, drooling monstrosity. "Not since the day you murdered my boy!" Gasps filled the room. "Men, stand down. The king is not well. Call the physician," said Nestor, doing his best to ignore the grieving father's accusations. "Admit it, General," Xanos demanded. "Admit it! I know your secret, you know." Nestor's heart leaped into his mouth. He could taste its rhythmic thumping. "There's no secret. What happened to your son was a travesty, and shouldn't have— You took my boy Darren with you. You took him so you could sick one of your gargoyles on him, didn't you?" said Xanos, drooling, stepping closer to Nestor, his limp noticeable. "My liege, you know me better than that. Prince Darren's death was tragic, a casualty of one's duty in service of the Gargoylian kingdom. To you, sire," replied Nestor. "Now you imply I killed my only son, my heir to the throne? Guards, take this man and hang him for treason." Everyone stood their ground, appalled now by their king's obvious fragile mentality. The 4 guards began marching toward the general, still unsure what action to take. All the while, Xanos eyed Nestor, his bloodshot eyes looking through him. "What happened was hardly treasonous," said Nestor. "I do, however, take full responsibility for Darren's death. You trusted me with his safety, and he died on my watch. I have never forgotten that day. I mourn him and am grateful for him. If it hadn't been for him, dozens more men would have died, myself included. Those gargoyles were sick, Xanos. They had no idea what damage they were causing, whom they were hurting. But if you truly need someone to blame, you may blame me." Xanos' eyes welled up, his jaw quivering. The king's hands ran through his hair, streaking it back into a mess of greasy locks. "I do blame you. I blame you. I curse you every morning when I wake. I curse your name every night before the nightmare seize me by the throat." Nestor shook his head, sorrowful, filled with guilt. "I'm sorry. Truly, I am so sorry. In fact, I am so apologetic that I must resign as your general of this grand Gargoylian army. I will take my leave. I cannot remain loyal to a king who curses me and calls me a traitor." Xanos sprouted a gruesome smile. "Good. Then be gone with you. Be gone with your wretched ways." Nestor stepped closer to the mentally unstable king. "I hope you find peace. Then perhaps one day you will forgive me." Xanos' mouth pursed. Tears crashed over his hollow cheeks. "I only wish you heartbreak and despair. Oh, Nestor of Darnus, may your loved ones fall by your side and, by your undoing, wilt in the darkness of the shadows you cast upon them." Nestor scowled at Xanos, disgusted with the man he had become. Grief had turned the ruler into a gruesome version of himself. Nestor wanted nothing more to do with him. So for Nestor, this was the end of his lifelong military service to his beloved kingdom. This was the end of an old friendship and the beginning of the end for the old general. The crackling fire spit and spat in the small farmhouse of Darnus. Nestled in his father's old armchair, Nestor sat comfortably reading a book of poetry his mother had written years ago. The now 50-year-old Nestor breathed deeply within his childhood home, reminiscing about simpler times, an entire life lived. A poem caught his eye and tickled his heart. A small piece of his parents still lived on in this old cabin of theirs. "Father," said Orion, "I have something important to discuss with you and Mother." "Of course, we can talk. What's this about?" asked Nestor. Phaedra strode into the main room, drink in hand, sipping on it as she strolled in to take her seat. What is so important? Where's my drink? Asked Nestor, joking. In the kitchen. I am training it to sprout legs. Hasn't quite learned that trick. It's a bit of a slow learner. Oh, I assume you mean like me then? Asked Nestor. Well, of course, dear, said Phaedra. It all makes sense now. Go on, son, but speak slowly, please. On account of the slow learning of your age, father? Asked Orion. Phaedra choked on her drink. That was rude, she said. Absolutely correct, but rude nonetheless. The three shared a hearty chuckle at Nestor's expense. Thankfully for him, his ego had never been so thin it could not enjoy a good laugh, especially ones aimed at him. All right, son, what's so pressing? Orion situated himself in front of his parents so he could look them both in the eye. I've decided what I want to do with my life. I want to be a soldier, like you, father. Nestor and Phaedra grinned with their mouths and frowned with their eyes. Conflict filled them. What made you decide this route? Asked Nestor. Yes, please explain, said Phaedra. You've never expressed interest in the army before. Well, father, I've always idolized you both. Mother, I love you for your humor and wit, caring and kind ways. Father, I admire your courage and strength of duty to your country and your family. I want a life of adventure, the chance to make a life full of experiences and opportunities, like what brought the two of you together and made me. I feel that my joining the army could bring all of us great happiness, even if we are not always together, said Orion, now sitting back, taking a deep breath. Nestor stood up from his chair. Stand up, son. Orion obeyed. I'm sorry, father. Listen here. You need to know that this decision you are making is a dangerous one full of perils. Yes, sir. This life will not be easy. I'm aware, sir. This life will not be all fun, and at times the life will make you want to quit. It will break you down. Yes, sir. I understand. Good. I hope you do. But as I look back on my service to the kingdom, and after everything good and bad that happened, I still smile. I still feel gratitude for the decision I made, and even more so that it was supported by my family. And with that said, I give you my blessing, son. Nestor grabbed his son, pulling him in for a stern embrace. He patted his son on the back as hard as his aging body would allow. You're sure this is what you want, son? Asked Phaedra, now standing, joining her men in their embrace. Yes, mother, this is what I want, said Orion, his face flushed red with joy and relief. Nestor smiled wider. I believe this calls for a celebration. You honor our family, son. I see greatness in you. I always have. Nestor shot Phaedra a sly wink. She returned a mocking roll of the eyes. Thank you, father, replied Orion. The small family of three shared many drinks that night, telling stories of old days, and they shared hopes and dreams for what was to come. For one thing was certain, the future, in all of its intricacies, is still a daunting and mysterious presence. Even a seer, with all of his wisdom and foresight, could not truly understand the future brewing just over the dim horizon. Thank you for listening to Beasts of Men and Gods, Gargoyles Gift, a novella by Ryan M. Oliver. Narrated by Ryan M. Oliver. About the author. Ryan Oliver is the author of the new fantasy adventure series Beasts of Men and Gods. Soldiers of Fire is the first story within this grand fable, and Gargoyles Gift is a prequel to the series. Ryan's inspiration for writing and storytelling originated in years of studying history and reading great works of fiction. He aspires to improving his craft and bringing wonderful new tales to the world. Ryan currently works for the Department of the Navy while he develops into an author, speaker, and coach. Prior to his days within the civil service, Ryan worked as a substitute teacher for several years. Ryan hopes to continue teaching in other formats throughout his career. Born and raised in Kitsap County in Washington State, Ryan graduated from Bremerton High School In 2011, he earned a bachelor's degree in elementary education from Central Washington University. Ryan and his wife Ashley live with their 2 sons, Lucas and Jackson, in Bremerton, Washington.